The UK just didn't listen. The UK had no time for that particular international law. So that's the second way. The third way, which is the most recent example, now Julian Assange was extracted out of the embassy and put in Belmarsh prison for very interesting propaganda reasons, which I could go into if you want to ask me later. When that happened, the UK government allowed some US prosecutors to go into the embassy to take Assange's belongings and have a look through them, without a United Nations official present, and without any of Julian Assange's lawyers present. That's also a violation of not just international law, that's violating Britain's own laws. I always thought this country was a country that valued property, personal property. That principle of respect for someone's private property. I thought that was very central to the English state, but apparently when it comes to Julian Assange, when it comes to foreign journalists to expose Western war crimes, they can make an exception. So, that's, I've just given you 3 examples. I really urge you, have a look at Jonathan Cook's article. He goes through the 17 ways in which this has not been about enforcing the law. This has been about persecuting a journalist. Yeah, please go ahead.
So if Britain broke international law by disobeying a UN law, whatever that is, what's the legal remedy?
What's the legal remedy?
Yeah,
follow the law.
If you break international law,
follow the law.
You can be taken to the Hague, can't you?
The United Kingdom should just follow the law, so they should give
the
Julian
remedy?
Assange immediate release, and they should. Oh, did you have more? Sorry, I didn't hear you. What was the other part of the question?
I think you did. What if Britain has broken international law? What is the remedy in international law? Why aren't we being taken to the Hague?
That's the thing is, Julian Assange actually, it's an interesting case with him. The problem with international law is that, like labour law, international labour law is a good example of this. Both the International Labour Organization and the United Nations, they don't have any executive power. They can't enforce their law. It requires the willing cooperation of countries to carry the law out.
The Hague, then?
Now, Britain has a long history of not obeying international law. And actually for me, I always thought rule of law is a general concept, national, local, whatever. That is another very basic British idea as well. I always thought rule of law was a basic British value, going all the way back to Magna Carta, when we said to King John that he couldn't just do whatever he wanted, that he had to respect the rights of nobility and he had to respect the right of peasants of the forest. This Magna Carta was, in many ways, was supposed to be laying the groundwork for the rule of law, and yet now we're sort of walking all over it. By we, I don't mean us, the people. We respect the law. We are just law-abiding people. It's a British state which acts as a rogue state and just does whatever it wants when it doesn't suit it. The case of Iraq is a very obvious example, but there are many ways in which Britain has undermined international legal proceedings. So I've spoken about Julian Assange. I hope that's answered your question.
Well, not really.
It's not really answered your question.
No,
the answer is basically Britain.
I'm also not sure it was actually a UN legal ruling, so much as an opinion from a UN rapporteur, somebody who gives a view on something. It doesn't got the force of international law. I may be wrong, but I think.
No, when the United Nations rules, that was a ruling. It was a ruling. You can look it up yourself. I've read the document myself and I've gone through it, and it is a legal ruling. I can answer your question, and then I just want to, it's not a long speech, I just want to talk about Libya and then wrap it up. So,
No, it's just, if we deported Julian Assange to Sweden for the rape allegations, because you said these women didn't think they were being raped, that doesn't necessarily mean they weren't raped.
So you got to speak up, I can't hear you.
Sorry, if we deport Julian Assange to Sweden, is he more likely to be deported to America, or extradited to America from Sweden than here?
In both cases, it's very likely. Both Sweden and Britain they have a very, you can just read, there's a CIA analyst called Paul, I can't remember his surname, but I can find it for you. And he said, do you think Sweden is a neutral country, and you don't think it's in America's sphere of influence? And that's a big mistake. It's very much like Britain. Its intelligence services have a very strong working relationship with American intelligences, and they don't want to lose that relationship. So they're often very willing to cooperate on matters like Assange. So yeah, I think it's just as likely to be from Sweden as from Britain. Remember, Julian Assange's lawyers repeatedly asked the Swedish authorities, because remember, Julian Assange wanted to be investigated about these rape allegations. He said he wanted to be investigated. He had nothing to hide. He said, I'm happy to go to Sweden on the condition you do not extradite me to the United States. I'm happy to go to... He said that repeatedly, and the Swedish authorities never gave him that reassurance. Never.
But they couldn't do that, could they?
Of course they can. Of course they can.
Well, they can't if they want to follow international law.
But now, I'm not going to go too much on the Assange case. I'm going to answer
Just one thing I want to
questions.
say about Assange is that I had a lot of sympathy with him, I still do, and Britain has no right to detain him, but he made himself his own worst enemy. During the whole time he was in that embassy, he was rude to the staff,
no
he never
evidence of this.
washed, so he smelt like a
evidence of this.
polecat. He smeared the toilet walls with his own excrement. Come on, if people are doing
So
you
how
a
old-
favour
how
by
old are
giving you
you?
hospitality, if you people are
That's a rather
doing you a
racist
favour by
comment.
giving you,
How old
if
are you?
people are
Literally.
doing you
No,
a
I'm saying
favour
he's
by
acting like
giving
a
you
child. You
if
should act
people-
your own age.
if people are giving you hospitality and doing you a favour, you don't rub them up the wrong way, and he did.
All of these,
And that's
all of
why
these
they threw him
claims,
out.
all of these claims are worth being dismissed. Do you know why? Do you know what? There's a good reason. The staff that made up these lies, these rumours, which have no evidence at all. Remember, let's just use logic for a second. Let's use logic for a second. When somebody says something, you need to have evidence
Said
for
the
it.
Murdoch media.
There was no evidence for this. The people who made up those claims, first of all, they're anonymous, but if they are from the embassy, we know who they are. They're from Lenin Moreno's government. So Rafael Correa was the one who gave Julian Assange political asylum, legally claimed his right to political asylum from a hostile enemy, the U.S. This is his enemy, right? It's trying to imprison him for just reporting the truth. When he went into the embassy, they were very sympathetic to him. You can find pictures and videos of him celebrating his birthday with them, having a great time. He had a wonderful time with them for years, actually, considering the very harsh situation that Britain and America put
They
Assange
cut off
under.
his internet, or is that
Now,
not
what
true?
happened was, when Lenin Moreno got elected, the hard right-wing leader took over in Ecuador, you saw a complete change of tune. They started to persecute Assange. They started to treat him terribly. They started to cut off his internet, you mentioned that. They started to do all kinds of things to make his life miserable. You can follow, if you look carefully, this was a change that happened. After this happened, then you had all the claims about smearing feces on the walls, all kinds of ridiculous, just childish. That's why I say, at your age, you're a grown man, you shouldn't just find the stuff
That's a patronising
titillating.
comment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you might think it's patronising. I think it's patronising to a journalist who's done so much for us.
People are giving you hospitality,
So much of-
don't abuse it.
Well, you can believe that if you want to. You can believe whatever you want, but it's wrong. I'm sorry. There's no evidence that that's happened.
But excuse me, you haven't answered the gentleman's question. What's the remedy when UK violate UK laws and international laws? He means remedy, he means what's the response, what's the punishment for this? What's the
I just
penalty?
told you. No, I answered your question already. I answered your question. I said to you that the United Nations doesn't have any executive power.
So this means...
So it can't just take Britain to The Hague,
so
or
this
take
means UK,
William Hague to
US,
The Hague.
UK, USA, Germany, these powerful countries, they are in charge of the laws. So when they violate the laws, no response, no punishment, no penalty.
You can't punish. First of all,
This is the question, I think.
you can bring a case to The Hague. That's possible, and you can.
They are in charge
It can be
of-
enforced
they are in
through
charge of the
certain
Hague.
US and European agencies. It can be.
When it
But
comes to national
international
interest,
law doesn't
let
have
me
any
tell you,
binding.
this
Well, it's
thing
binding, but
on
it doesn't
any
have
value.
any, like I said, executive power. Any power to enforce it. It can't be enforced. It can only be enforced by the will of the states at hand. That's how it works.
Mostly gifted
So I've
figures
just
when
given
it
you.
is against
So you asked me what the
powerful
remedy is.
countries.
The remedy is not to just rely on the United Nations. The remedy is for the British people to try and get Britain to enforce the law, to use non-violent action,
This is what
to use lobbying. These are the ways the British public can use their power, which they have considerable amounts
Excuse me,
of
when it comes to
free time and
interest-
energy and resources and intellectual resources. They can do that. They can pressure the British government to obey international law and bring about a fair settlement to Julian Assange. That's possible. It's been done in the past with other cases.
Can
It
I
can
ask
be done
what
again.
the relationship is between Assange and Trump and Farage, or is that all made up?
Again, I haven't seen any evidence at all that Assange
we know
has been
Farage visited
coordinating
him,
with
don't we?
Nigel Farage. What these are basically attempts by the
we've seen
media
photographs
to
of
make
Farage
Assange
going
look
into
like
the embassy.
a hard right sympathiser, and to make nice liberal English people who might actually take to the streets on something like this. Because remember, this is violating things like free
So
speech,
why was Farage
free
there?
press. If you're going to let me answer your questions, you've got to do them one by one. I can't just...
Well, it's the same question.
Farage visited, thousands of people visited. Literally, he was in there for 7 years. Thousands of people visited that embassy. Alright? So I don't see anything particularly unusual about Nigel Farage visiting. I think most Lots of politicians visiting them. And also, free speech and the free press are not particularly left-wing or liberal values. Someone like Nigel Farage can believe in them just as much as anyone else. I say this, and I despise the man, but I believe that he can have those values just as much as anyone else.
Can I ask another question?
No, I'm going to finish my speech and then I'll take questions.
Okay.
So, the next part of my speech was about Libya. So, actually, before I go on, there's a very interesting activist you should check out called Kieran O'Reilly. He's come to Speaker's Corner before, and he did a 100-day vigil outside of the embassy. Very remarkable man. I think if you ever have time to check out any one of the activists who's been involved in the Assange solidarity movement, Kieran O'Reilly is the most interesting one. You can even fund him as well. You can support him. He has a GoFundMe website. So, but yeah, that's just a digression. Let me get back to my main idea. The reason why British foreign policy is so terrible is because we let the British elites make it, and we don't make it ourselves. If the British public decided how we related to the rest of the world, then Britain would relate to the rest of the world in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way, like a more sound and logical way. The example of Libya is a very good case in point. When Britain collaborated with the US and France in destroying Libya, what happened was something very interesting consequences happened. Two very dangerous, ungoverned spaces tore open. The fabric of Libya was torn open. In the west you had Sabratha, and in the east you had Benghazi. Oh, sorry, it was the other way around. In the east you had Benghazi, in the west you had Sabratha. And by the way, I'm getting all this from a very interesting British historian called Mark Curtis, who I collaborated with a while ago on some research in a very small way. One wonderful historian. You can check out his website. What happened was, when that western piece of fabric tore out of Libya, you had an ungoverned space awash with weapons, awash with radical Islamists ready to train up, willing young men to go into battle. And remember, NATO had actually been collaborating with some of these radical Islamists to oust Gaddafi. So when they got rid of the colonel, they met their short-term aim of getting rid of the colonel, but they didn't think that the people they collaborated with to do that would one day turn on us. This is radical Islamists don't care. They get help from the West to get rid of Gaddafi. They don't honor that relationship, but they're going to be happy to turn their guns on us, and that's exactly what they did. So what happened was, you had the Manchester bomber. Manchester bomber came out of that ungoverned space. You also had the Port El Kantai machine gunner who attacked about, I think it was 24 or 3 people as they came out of a hotel in Tunisia. Most of these people are British. These people were gunned down. Those are two examples, but France has been struck. Germany's been struck by you had in Berlin, the market lorry attack. That was done by someone trained up in Libya. Now, according to Mark Curtis, terrorism has spread to 14 different countries since the attack on Libya. Since Britain, France, and America. Since Cameron, Sarkozy, and Obama wrecked that country, they opened it up to all kinds of. Power abhors a vacuum. It's like gravity; it just can't exist without. It has to be filled up, right? That vacuum. And the toughest and nastiest men took over in those parts of North Africa. Now, this is, for me, a clear example of how British foreign policy can have terrible consequences for the rest of the world. By the way, it's not just rich countries like France and Tunisia even, and Britain and Germany. There are countries like Egypt have been affected, Morocco has been affected, a lot of other places in the third world, in that region, 14 countries in total. So I've given you two examples, terrible British foreign policies, which are only that bad because the elites make the policies. If we made those policies, hold on 1 second. If the elites made those policies, if the public made them, if we decided through face-to-face assemblies of the people at local levels how we want to relate to the rest of the world, then I think we'd have a much more ethical, logical, sound relationship with the rest of the world. Britain wouldn't be looked on and feared and despised by a lot of the world. It would be seen as a helpful force for good. That's what I think we could be, and that's what we should be. But we need a democratic revolution to take back our country. That's what we need.
The point about Gaddafi is he wasn't without funding things like that himself. So he supposedly funded the air crash in North England. That was down to him, and he did other things. So he was. I mean, whatever you think of it, he was also arming or letting the IRA train in Libya.
you know what's very interesting? There was some,
so it's just a matter of...
This again demonstrates
how you deal with Gaddafi. It's not do you not deal with it.
This again demonstrates the duplicity of British elites. It's quite interesting. So there was an IRA attack, and they had been using Libyan weapons to carry it out. The British victims of those attacks, do you know what they did? They actually lobbied the British government to try and get Libya to apologise for that, to try and get Gaddafi to apologise. And at the time, Britain had a very good relationship with Libya. It wasn't the relationship they had up until 2011. At that time, Gaddafi was kind of playing ball. He was trying to actually see if he could ward off an attack by the West and, you know, open up some of their oil to the West. So Britain didn't want to actually get them to apologise. So Britain is actually willing to put its trade deals, well, I say Britain, the British elites are willing to put their trade deals with countries like Libya above getting justice for victims of IRA attacks. So listen, sorry? No, this lady makes a good point. It's not just Britain, it's the great powers. It's the great power. This is why it's in the nature of being a great power. If Britain wants to be this force actively shaping the world, then they often feel like this is what they need to do. France does it as well. Italy, Russia, China, they all play this game. America is the most important one. America is by far and away the most powerful country in the world. Far more powerful than Russia's got an economy the size of Spain. America really is the hyperpower, as some people have called it. I think that's a good way to put it. It's not just a superpower, hyperpower. All of the great powers behave this way. But I think I'd rather live in a normal country than a great power. If being a great power means we're actively making the lives of millions of people around the world miserable and keeping back progress for countries like Libya or Israel or Indonesia, then I don't think it's worth it, to be totally honest with you. I think a much more equitable power relationship makes sense. I think countries like Britain and France and Russia shouldn't be dominating the rest of the world.
What makes you think the public will be better at making these decisions than the elites at the moment? Are we not going to just end up polarising as we have again? We're seeing in the Brexit vote, when we give the public these big, difficult decisions to make. What we've just left with is a big mess and people just fighting against each other.
So the gentleman asks is, what makes the public better at making decisions than the elites?
And will it not just make us more polarise us rather than...
Listen, polarisation is good in politics. People taking sides on issues is good. In ancient Greece, there was a special name for those citizens who did not take a side on an issue. They called them idiots. And in an ancient Greek sense, that meant someone who only cared about their own well-being. They were the kind of person who would wait to pick a side, to see who was going to win, and then maybe pick the winning side. So I actually think polarisation is not a bad thing. The issue about making good decisions, though, that's interesting. The only way you can learn to make good decisions is by making decisions. I mean, people see this with their children, for example. You give them more and more responsibility as they get older, and they learn to use that responsibility. And I think the same applies across the national level. The more and more the public have been trusted with responsibility, such as giving women the vote, or giving working men the vote, or giving Irish Catholics the right to stand as MPs in Parliament. All of these progressive movements have been giving more people responsibility for decision making. It's just that now I think we're at the point where we're such generally speaking, quite an educated public. Very well educated. If you look at the rest of the world, a lot of the rest of the world, Britain's we've got a lot of resources at our disposal to learn about the issues of the day and make up our minds. I think we could.
By education, you mean political education?
Yeah, no, I don't mean getting a university degree. That's actually in many ways the opposite of an education. That's being taught how to do what you're told, and basically fulfill each and every one of your tutor's grading requirements. A real education you take for yourself. You don't just give it. You don't just get given it. And I think taking part in democratic assemblies is an educational process. You learn more and more how to make decisions. Remember, if you're going to make a motion in a local assembly... Can you start your question again, because I didn't hear it? Sorry, at the beginning.
You look at the opinion polls, I can bring them up to you, where the plurality of people supported going in and moving.
Sure. Do you know why they supported it?
I think this was because there's unrelenting pro-level coverage in the mainstream media. So what do you do in your democracy to ensure that the people aren't bought by corrupt
this is a very good question. The man says here, well, look at the example of Libya. Most British people supported the attacks on Libya.
And they're up.
Right? And I'll give you there's other examples of this as well. Most British people think that Julian Assange was in the embassy of Ecuador willingly, and he wasn't being arbitrarily detained. Most people, but that's what most British people think. Most British people, when English soldiers were on the line in Iraq, started to support the war. They went from not supporting it, but when they saw, remember, soldiers are risking their lives for political decisions, so naturally they get a lot of sympathy. Makes sense, right? Those are just 3 examples. Now, a lot of this is because of the media, so that's why we can't just democratize political decision making. We have to also, I think, democratize the means of communication. The reason why a lot of British people supported the attacks on Libya was because there was a very visceral claim made by the BBC, the Guardian, etc., that Colonel Gaddafi was giving his men Viagra, and he was telling them to go on like rape sprees. Also, there was a claim made that Colonel Gaddafi was he was going to ethnically cleanse Benghazi and get rid of its population. Now, ironically, the real ethnic cleansing began after the West invaded. When the West invaded, there was a lot of racists in Libya took their advantage. They took their chance to launch an attack on black Libyans in Libya. That actually happened after the Western invasion. But the media had this, remember in Iraq as well, there was a claim that Saddam Hussein's men were feeding human beings into shredders, paper shredders, and then using their bodies to feed the fishes, like fish food. The other one I thought was interesting as well was during the Gulf War, you had this claim made by someone who later turned out to be a member of the Kuwaiti royal family, who said, the Iraqi soldiers, they come into our hospitals, they take the babies, and they out of the incubators and they leave them on the floor to die. By the way, every single one of these claims was completely false. The humans being shredded, Viagra-fueled rape sprees, ethnic cleansing in Benghazi, and the babies being left on the floor. All of them completely false. Not a single shred of evidence to suggest that these were happening or were going to happen. So the media needs to be democratized. The British public cannot trust the mainstream media to have all that power to decide what's really happening in the world. We need to also democratize the newspapers, the broadcasting, and the radio. It's absolutely essential that we decide in a rational way how we get our news. I don't think we can trust elites to decide how we understand the world either. Sorry, you're going to ask a question? That's a big one, yeah. Yeah. Of course it's a big question, yeah.
Brexit, that in a lot of people's minds is completely bizarre what's going on. You've got, when all the migrants are coming, who wants to help these people? There were so many people that didn't want to know and said, no, I'm a migrant, I don't want you in my country. How are you going to make them see?
Trying to motivate everyone, to get some nice things if this guy shows up. Oh my God, it's going to be a drama, it's going to be a fucking circus. It's going to be a circus again, bro.
And then there's no drama for ages.
No, bro, I don't like the idea. I'm going to tell you straight up, I don't like the idea.
Listen.
No, it just fucking attracts all the other ignorant fuckers to this place. Do you understand?
Let's see if he's calmed down. He might learn his lesson.
No, man, this guy doesn't... He don't know nothing, bro. He's not academic, he's a roadman. So roadmen don't talk. Film.
No, man, I'm a roadman as well, man.
So I film, exactly my point. I'm a roadman. Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? If you're mine, stay behind the camera, man. Don't take that roadman in front of the camera. I'm talking about everybody like that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say, bro? Everybody should know their fucking place, man. Because sometimes it just gets stupid, bro. Just so stupid. Brings down fucking all kinds of levels of intellectual. And he's gonna wing it. He's gonna wing it. He hasn't even prepared anything. He's just gonna chat shit now. This guy.
Let's see.
What?
Man like Leon and that.
We're gonna let you say a bit,
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna go because I've got something that I need to do.
Are you gonna, what, you want that view, yeah?
Yeah, with the background. It's outside the park. They can't.
What camera is that?
That's soccer films.
Oh, soccer films, yeah.
Big on the ends now, Christian.
Oh, see.
So, I was walking and talking.
But don't say about me going, you know what I'm saying.
All right.
We just say, you know what I mean, yeah. Don't bring me up with that.
Yeah, okay. So, I've just been accosted by Mo, who wants to say something. about what happened with Ali Dawah. So, over to you.
Alright, first of all, yeah, peace to everyone, yeah, assalamu alaikum. Obviously, I'm gonna make a little dua first, yeah, before I speak. Obviously, just before I start, obviously, Anthony and Joshua got knocked out last night and all that, but that's not important right now. But it's linked to that, innit?
This is for comedy.
No, serious thing, yeah? So basically, I know actually Joshua's my brethren, innit? But anyway, listen to this, yeah? So basically, man like Bob the Builder, yeah? I was very, very shocked to see, I think it was 2 weeks ago or something, when I was looking at through my phone, I see people, like, mix of people, trying to violate, yeah, Mr. Bob the Builder, who Mr. Bob the Builder talks from the heart. He's not sly or nothing. If you got a question, he's gonna ask you that question. Now what the Bob the Builder did, he asked them a question. Simple question, answer the question, they didn't answer the question. So he's asking, because you know, there's a hadith from Imam Ali, he says the person that's wise, when he is asked the question, he answers. He doesn't leave the question, he answers the question. Bob the Builder asked them a question. He asked them, and they were saying, no comment, I'm fasting. Yo, what go on? What are you saying?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so he asked them a legitimate question, yeah? Now, they should have had better manners, yeah? And spoke to Bob in a better manner. Because Bob, I just wanted to say before anything, the Christian people, obviously there's Catholic, because I spoke to a chick on the bus, she said she's from Portugal. I said, are you from Fatima City? She said, nah, that's Catholic. I'm Christian or something like that. But Fatima City, if you don't know, is a holy place in Portugal where a miracle happened. Where, I'm not going to go into the details about it, but you can check out about the church in Fatima City. Is a holy city in Portugal, right? Fatima is the daughter of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. So there's a link between Islam and Christianity, but I'll come back to that later. Now, the Christian people, first of all, you should have the best respect to the Christian people. Why? Let me tell you why, first of all. Because Allah says in the Quran, the most loveliest people are the Christian people. This is in the Quran. Because most of them, they don't read Arabic. I'm the one who speaks more Arabic than all of them. I challenge anyone, £1,000 now cash, yeah? Anyone can beat me in Arabic. They can't. Because my descendant is from bloodline is Arab, 100%, yeah? So my Arabic is better than all of their Arabic. Half of them don't speak, most of them don't speak Arabic. The 2% that speak Arabic, their Arabic is broken. I speak the Arabic Fusha, you know what I'm saying? The proper Arabic, you get me? So they don't even read the Quran, half of them. They come here, blah, 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 blah. What are you doing, bruv? Do you even read the Quran? Do you even know Arabic? Do you even know the meanings of the verses? When Allah's saying the Christian people are the nicest people, I go to the church. There's some nice churches around Leicester Square sides, yeah, them back sides and that, back roads and that. I light the candles, I sit down, I pray to Allah, but obviously I remember Jesus, Moses and all that. Do you get me? So man's coming to Bob the Builder, instead of showing him respect and coming to him, Bob the Builder, here's a present, because Allah's saying in the Quran, وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَ النَّاسِ مُوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. What does that mean? It means the closest people to the believers are the Christians. And that's why a lot of these people are not believers. They're Muslim by name, but they're not believers. So the believer, if you're a believer, you should be very nice to Bob the Builder, yeah? You got to go in 2 minutes?
Yeah, we're talking about this.
Okay, and also, what's this? Shut up and I will bank you up if I'm not fasting. What's this talk, bruv? You have to have the best manners. Even if Bob the Builder punches me this side, I'll say punch me this side. If he punches me now this side, I'll say punch me this side. Here, have 2 punches. Yeah, test it. I'm not going to hit him back.
No reason to strike both.
Yeah, and then look at, and they're getting rude to Bob the Builder and they punch him, and then they punch him and they call feds. Imagine they're punching him, they're hitting him, and then they call feds. How are you going to call feds some snitching thing after you're the one that hit him, bro? This is not right, bro. First of all, that's a snitching thing. Second of all, you punched him in his face. What's all this, bro? What's this manners of Muslim, bro? No way. And he asked you about Usul-ud-Din, the pillars of Islam. You don't even know that Usul-ud-Din is 5. First is Tawheed, Adl, Nubuwa, Imama, Qiyamah. I just want to say that Usul-ud-Din is wrong. If you don't have... First is Tawheed, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Then it's the justice of Allah. Then it's the prophethood. Then it's the Imama. And then it's the Qiyamah, believing in the Qiyamah. So even there, I just want to say, and the actions towards Bob was not acceptable. That was not acceptable at all, bruv. What's me? I'm going to drop you if I'm not fasting. Ali Dawah, come on, bruv.
It was funny.
What would you mean I'm going to drop you if I'm not fasting, bruv. What is that da'wah, bruv? You meant to be telling him, brother Bob, what about Cain, yeah? That guy Cain, yeah? I call him the wild pig, yeah? I know it's not his fault. He's probably a good guy, but he's reading Sahih Bukhari and all these books. A man from Uzbekistan that came hundreds of years after the Prophet, writing lies about the Prophet Muhammad. So obviously Cain's going to read them and start dissing the Prophet, which is wrong. But if you're a bad man, say that to Cain. You come to Bob the Builder because Bob the Builder he's a decent guy. But if you're a bad man, go to Cain, DCCI. Only I can go up to Cain. I can tell Cain, walk one, brother. What, you want to do MMA? I'm on that, bro. You man ain't on that. You lot go to Bob the Builder just because he's not as big as Cain. I swear, if you're a bad man, go to Cain, yeah? And say, what, like that. I'll bang you and try and bang Cain. You think he won't bang you, bruv? Like, he won't. You only pick on people that's not on that, about that life, bruv. Because he's coming on a humble thing, bruv. Come on, bruv. I'm telling Cain, yeah? Cain, me and you can talk, but what I'm saying is that you're reading from Bukhari. Bukhari says lies about the Prophet. He's from Uzbekistan. He came hundreds of years after. He doesn't know nothing about the Prophet. The people that know about the Prophet Muhammad is his family, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein, where the angel Gabriel came in their house and gave the revelation. Not to Uzbekistan, Bukhari, saying lies about the Prophet Muhammad. And people are dissing the Prophet Muhammad because of Bukhari.
We've got to go now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, bro, anyone touches Bob or any Christian, come to me first, bro. Come to me first, bro, because Christian people are nice people, bro. They're humble people, they priest, they go to the church. Yeah?
And I hope one day that we can call you one.
Yeah, I follow Christ. I follow Christ. I am a true follower of Christ.
No, I've got to go.
All right, Bob, listen, anyone troubles you, bro, no one's allowed to trouble you, bro. Just call me straight away, bro. Don't worry, I know you're not a snitch, you don't call feds, but call me, bro. What? Where are you going back from? Hey, where's that Usco CC? What? Hey, what are you from? What, you closed the thing? Huh? You closed it?
No, it's still running.
It's still running? Hey,
man, man, they pre-arranged it.
Hey, fam, what was I going to say? Hey, what, is TNTS here?
Yeah, you want to call him out?
Yeah, call him, tell him to come here, blood. Hey, see, where's your phone, though? Where's your phone, bro? Where's your phone?
Dead, man. Instead, I'm going to turn it on still.
Are you going to turn it on? Hey, I'm going to hold it. I'm here now. Hey, man's got things to say, blood. Hey, bring TNT, blood. Hey, man, come back after you finish, blood.
Yeah.
Man, it's king tonight, blood.
Say that, I'm coming back. I'm going to film them, man. You're making me miss it, man. I'm coming back. Nah, C.O.E. It's bigger than BBs. Content over everything. Yeah.
Hang on. Yeah. Come on, bro.
That thing. I need to get TNTS green.
Religion before Jesus came to the set. You had people that went worshipping him.
So this brother, we ended up talking off camera. I'll wait for Leon to say he's ready. So the wind's quite strong, so is your microphone going to be all right? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, you might have a bit of a wind problem, Raoul, to be fair. Yeah. Thank you very much. So basically, this brother off camera talked to me and we had a brief discussion in which you described yourself as a seeker. And I invited you to talk to me on camera, to ask whatever questions you like, and I'll do my best to give an appropriate answer. And the reason why I want it on camera is I suspect there might be other people that think similar to this brother, who might have similar questions, and so it gives an opportunity to answer not just for you, but maybe for other people as well. Okay, so yeah, just introduce yourself and ask away.
So essentially, the conversation that you just described was of what the first question was, what faith I am from. So as I said, I went to school in a Christian school. I have Christianity in my family, but I also have other religions, other denominations. So for me, as a human person that had this connection with God itself, which I've always felt from a very, very young age, but as I was given a narrative, yeah, from first my Christian school, where I wasn't able to, not necessarily challenge, but I suppose you could say on some occasions challenge, to question, to get more insight, to get more of an understanding of what this faith pertains. So for me, I wasn't able to get that in schools. I wasn't able to get that with the people that were around me, because a lot of people are followers of faith, but not necessarily teachers of faith. So I may ask my father, he'll have his perception, I'll ask my, friends and priests and whatever, and they will always have a different perception. So I always found that a bit of a disconnect for this all-encompassing truth. So this is where my issue lies, is that you may have this truth in Islam, you may have it, everyone says that we have it over here, come over here and I'll tell you it. So as you said, I'm a seeker, but I understand because it's within me, and we all have it.
It sounds to me that you are describing what the studies of religion, because I studied religion at university.
Same.
And so what you seem to be describing to me is what is known as the religion of the self, which is this idea that people have an innate connection to the truth. It lay within them, and it is something that you can connect to through your emotions. You have the authority for that truth is you.
Not so much.
So what is your? Because I invited you to ask me questions.
Yeah.
But what you've done is describe a position.
Well, you
so that invites me now to ask questions of your position.
Absolutely fine.
So in terms of your position, do you believe that there's such a thing as objective truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, a book had clear contradictions to history, like the Scientologists, they say that human beings came to Earth being carried by aliens, and that through the use of nuclear weapons, our souls were entrapped in these bodies, and that really we're thetans, and that the point of life is to escape the things that stop you from having a sort of Gnostic spiritual self out there. But that obviously contradicts everything that we can possibly know about astronomy, history, physics, and all the rest of it. So it would be fair to me to say that that is false, and that a belief system built on that is false. Would you agree with that?
To a degree. I mean, for me, the historical element that we use religion to be in line with the historical events, as that gives it more substantial truth. But to me, I find even in history, as we say, some of the victors are the writers of our history, and you find a lot of gaps. We have dark ages, we have several dark ages, we have civilizations being completely broken down, where their books have been destroyed, and so they haven't got their chain of narration. They haven't got their chain. Where it has been broken down, and their people have been broken down. So I find it tricky to use history
Well, let's look at that. You've misunderstood and misused what the Dark Ages were. The Dark Ages is a Christian term referring to the time at the time that just after the collapse of Roman antiquity, in which Roman learning ceased. It doesn't mean that learning ceased. The Visigoths and the Goths still had their own learning, but it wasn't Roman learning. But because the Christian church had grown up in the Roman Empire for 4 centuries, it had this sense of what a civilization was, that when it collapsed under these barbarian invasions, it named those barbarian invasions and the kingdoms that came after it the Dark Ages, okay? Which came to an end at things like the Carolingian Renaissance and so on. Now, in terms of our use of history, yes, history is written by the victors, and it has its blind spots. So, for example, many people can talk about the great scientific men of history, but the knowledge of the scientific women of history is often understated, and so it has a blind spot created by a patriarchal society. However, that doesn't mean that the description of the scientific men is somehow false. So it still states truth. So when we see claims about history, and we find evidence supporting certain claims over other claims, would you agree with me that it is fair to say that those claims that are supported by the evidence are true, and those claims that are contradicted by the evidence are false?
I wouldn't say as an absolute truth, but I would say it would outweigh the others' findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I since you've not taken it upon yourself to ask any questions.
Well, I was going to say about the Dark Ages of Jesus Christ, for example.
Do you want to say or do you want to ask?
Well, I wanted to ask, it's a bit of both, really.
Yeah.
So my understanding of the Dark Ages, also as you corrected me, or I don't know if it was in the correction itself, because I just mentioned it, the Dark Ages of regardless to whether it's religious history or not, it's what you're saying. Anyway, Jesus' Dark Ages posed a lot of problems for me.
What do you mean by Jesus' Dark Ages?
Was there a period of time, correct me if I'm wrong, was there not a period of time from Jesus going off into, some people are saying that he
So there was that bit of his life that isn't covered in the Gospels.
not documented.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's absolutely true. But the thing that you've got to remember is, if you look at the biographies of Jesus that are written in the Gospels, and you compare them to the kinds of biographies that are written of other major characters in history of the same period, the format and the model of the biography is the same. Because biographies in the ancient world were not something like we might write a biography today, where you talk about each part of their life in equal chapters that covers systematically their beginning, their middle and the end. That's a modern way of writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the ancient world, you wrote about those things that were most important about the person. So in some of the histories about the Caesars, their biography is like a speech that they gave before a major battle. Why? Because that major battle was seen as the high point of their life.
Yeah.
The biography of the Christ is about his passion and resurrection. If you look at the Gospel of Mark, it gives you half the chapters talking about Christ before the passion, and then from about the midway section, it's all about him going up to Jerusalem. It's all about him being crucified and about the resurrection. So it talks about the importance part of his life.
But how do we know that Dark Ages of Jesus Christ wasn't as important as the documented era?
Because
it wasn't documented equals that it's not important?
No, because what we have within the life of Christ is his ministry, which lasted about 3 years. Now that ministry was the fulfillment, his life was the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. There were Old Testament prophecies that were beyond Christ's ability to control. They were beyond his ability to control other people. That for them to be fulfilled, they had other people all to work together. Okay? And when you look at all these prophecies and see them stacking up, it points towards Jesus as being the fulfillment of prophecies that predate him by hundreds of years. Now that means that if you have an historical account that is fulfilling prophecies that were written long before that historical account, and is then supported as history by other historical accounts, by other historians, confirming that historical narrative that you find in the Gospels.
Some historians, yeah.
Yes, well, all the major ones of the time. Then what you have is you have a sort of miraculous evidence for the truth of the Christian faith, and a historical evidence for the truth of the Christian faith. So I'll give you an example of that if you want.
Please.
Yeah. So the fact that Christ was crucified on a cross, contradicts the Koran, for instance. Contradicts the Koran. The Koran says Christ was never crucified on a cross. But the Gospels, which are first century literature, written by the followers of Jesus, say that he was. And then later historians of antiquity, pagan and Jewish, as well as Christian, all confirm the narrative that Christ was crucified on a cross. But that crucifixion is actually prophesied in the Psalms. It's actually prophesied in the book of Isaiah, literature that predates the actual events that are confirmed by later historians, confirmed by the Gospels. Okay. Yeah? So I'm going to show you. Yeah. Okay?
And do you believe in like Christophanies, you know, in regards to like people like Melchizedek?
Christophanies, theophanies.
Is that
They're called theophanies.
Okay, I thought it was a Christophany.
Yeah, they're called theophanies.
But just to be clear, your only evidence is the text, right? You make a big talk about evidence and what can be objective, but then when it comes to actual evidence, you're referring to the text.
Yes, we're referring to the text. Yeah. So, in the book of Isaiah, which is written hundreds of years before Christ's life, in chapter 53, it speaks like this. Now, I'm not going to read everything. I just want to zoom in on a particular part. Okay? Right? So, this is a description of the Messiah. A man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God and afflicted, but he was pierced through for our transgressions. Okay?
Yeah.
Right? Now, what happened on the cross?
Yeah. They
pierced him through.
Yeah. I understand that.
Okay. Now,
see where you,
this was something that could not be in Christ's control. Okay? The Romans had many forms of execution. Christ could have died by the beating that he received. Yeah? They scourged him and whipped him, and that in itself had been known to kill people.
Yeah.
Okay? But he survived that, and they pierced him through, both with a lance and nails. Okay? That is all beyond his control. Now, in the Gospels, you know well that it talks about Christ being crucified. Okay? But there's also historians from antiquity that confirm the fact that Christ was crucified.
They were, sorry, who?
Historians.
Okay.
From, so Josephus is a historian from antiquity. He's writing 37 to 120 AD. And in his book, Antiquities, he states clearly that Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Tacitus, writing in 55 AD to 117 AD, states clearly that Christ was crucified. Now, if on one hand, I put it to you, and this is a question to you directly.
Yeah.
Say we have claims and counterclaims. Some people say Christ wasn't crucified, and other people say that he was. If we have prophecies predating the crucifixion, and then we have historians confirming the crucifixion after the event, and then we have some people saying that the crucifixion never happened and some people saying that the crucifixion happened, which one of them is making a statement of truth?
Well, this is what I mean. It's the point of the word truth behind it. I would say the word is more accurate, essentially, because you're saying it's truth. That means there's no falsity. Truth is this is absolute. You see what I mean?
Go on.
So this is the issue. That you can look at text, and essentially we look at text to support what we believe, don't we?
Yeah? In historical investigation.
In historical in most investigation, most people that investigate have an idea of what they're trying to get across here. Yeah. So for me, it's not that I'm disregarding what these texts say. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that there are lots of things that. Sorry. business I run as well. So what I'm trying to say is that I understand where you're coming from, but for me, that's one element. That's to prove that Jesus was put on a cross, okay?
Yeah.
But then there's the next one, which would be that he was Son of God, and that he did this for our sins.
Yeah.
So then there's having to prove that.
Well, let's just stick with the crucifixion for the moment, because what we're trying to get to is what truth is.
Yeah. Well,
I would put it to you
Yeah.
that truth is that narrative which most accurately corresponds to reality.
Yeah.
So it's that
we all
that,
have different
that,
realities. As
No,
you
but
see.
we don't. There are certain things that are subjective realities.
Yeah.
Like whether you like a cheeseburger or not.
Yeah,
That's
for
a
sure,
subjective
I
reality.
I get it.
Right?
But
It
what
can't
makes
be
that an
argued
objective
with.
reality?
Right, but an objective reality is the fact that we're all stood here in Hyde Park.
Absolutely.
That is an objective reality because it is a narrative that corresponds to the reality.
Yeah. But then in 1700 years' time, when they were trying to find out whether we did stand here,
they'd look at the videos.
But if in those times, this is the issue.
Exactly.
Exactly.
They'd look at the documents. And what do all the documents say?
Yeah.
The documents before Christ's crucifixion prophesy that the Messiah would be crucified. The Gospels proclaim that he was crucified, and the historians of antiquity confirm that he was crucified. So all the evidence confirms that Christ was crucified.
But there are some historians that don't agree with that.
Such as?
Well, I can't name the historians. I've watched them.
I only know.
Yeah.
I personally, I can't remember his name either, but I personally only know of one credible historian who is a mythologist.
Okay.
And he is contradicted by virtually every other historian of antiquity. Bart Ehrman, who is a historian of the first century, says that it is an undeniable fact that Christ was crucified. Bruce Metzger, who was the teacher of Bart Ehrman and also a historian of the first century, says that Christ was crucified. Even there's a Muslim historian called Sumat Haslan. He's got a name like he's from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. But he's a Muslim historian, and he himself says someone who looked like Christ was crucified. So even Muslims historians who engage with the evidence are forced to deal with the fact that someone who was identified as Christ died on a cross. So why would you not accept that?
Because it's for a person to go through these, I have to go through the history. I have to go through all the books and I have to read it, which I haven't as much as you.
Fair enough. That's absolutely fine.
So that's another process that I have to go through. But in regards to historians, that we look at, for example, there's the narrative of the history in religion and Christianity. Because there are so many people involved in it, because it's a religious element, that's why there is more evidence supported, more presented. But then when you look for the history of, say, the pyramids or something, historians are constantly arguing with one another. It couldn't have taken this amount of time.
No, but no one, hold on one second.
Yeah.
They might be arguing about how the Egyptians built the pyramids, but no one's arguing that the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids.
Yeah, they are. There's lots of people.
No.
Well, Graham Hancock, for example.
What's he saying? That the Egyptians did not build the pyramids?
He's saying that the Egyptians
Aliens
that
did
lived... No, this is what I'm trying to say. It's not necessarily just because we don't know who it is, it can't happen. It can't have happened. What I'm trying to say is that when you look at the evidence to weigh up when the pyramids happened, they said that the Egyptians obviously lived amongst the pyramids, and that they were...
And their hieroglyphics are everywhere.
the hieroglyphics were everywhere. Yeah.
And their practice of mummification is historically documented by the Egyptian culture, in the Egyptian culture.
Absolutely, but how do we not know that the Egyptians, while they were living there, they just used these tombs, to bury their kings in, because they also only found...
Does not the fact that But here, I want to try and cut to the chase.
No, I get it, but what I'm trying to say is,
I want to put it to you that you represent a phenomena that happens a lot in our society, and is probably even shared by many of the viewers of Content Over Everything and So.Co films. That there is this unwillingness to deal with objective truth because we have been brought up to doubt all truth claims in our society. There's a culture of radical skepticism that permeates our culture that makes a nonsense of historical or scientific or philosophical or rational inquiry. And what you're doing is you're replicating that sentiment now.
This is a rational inquiry. As a human being, not to just say, okay, so I went to a Christian school, and my priest and my father told me Jesus Christ is the way and the light, and that's it. That's the end of it. So when we talk about Christ being love and feeling it in your soul, so everything that is exemplified by Jesus for me is love. But I don't see it in the Christians. They don't exemplify that type of love when I see them speak of Jesus. So this is you can't look. We're all souls that we're trying to seek. Some people are not trying to seek. So let's not stamp on the people that are trying to seek.
No one's
just for the case of
no one's
trying to seek. Because you also went on that journey yourself.
I for me it was a journey between choosing between Islam and Christianity, and I chose Christianity. Let me just.
So I'm at that stage as well.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you, bro, what I'm saying to you, bro, is that, and again, this is something that I encounter a lot. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I speak to lots of people. And very often, lots of people reject Christianity because of some childhood experience. And you have referenced that childhood experience at least 2 or 3 times in your conversation with me.
Okay, that's where the journey started.
1 second.
Yeah.
So it is because of a childhood experience that you have come to question the Christian faith. And what I'm saying to you is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But now you're a man. Stop harping back to your childhood experience and deal with the evidence that is presented in front of you.
Okay, but I was just presenting the start of my journey.
Yeah, that's fine.
I haven't progressed into the different stages of where I am.
It's clearly formed your. It's clearly formed your emotional self, because what you're saying is that because as a child you were told things. And you didn't find you were able always to argue against those things.
No, to question and to gain answers from.
Right, but what I will notice, what I notice, and what everyone here will notice is the absence of questions. You've made a number of statements.
Oh, I'm not having. But what are the statements?
So you've made a statement about what happened to you as a child. You made a statement about truth being something that is constructed by the victors.
And why did you
You made a statement about there may be alternative histories. You made a statement, and a number of statements. I've not got a problem with you making statements. But what I'm saying is that when you make those statements, what you're defining is a position.
Well, no, because...
And that position invites me to interrogate that position.
That's fine.
And that's all I'm doing.
Yeah, that's fine. You know? But don't add all the other... Don't try to assign me to everyone else's ideologies, because this is the problem that I find. Is this kind of, you're either with us or you're not with us. And this is not, for me, this is not a good open door. Come into my Christian home and let me engage with you.
But bro, honestly, with the utmost respect, I'm not here to stroke your ego.
No, I don't want my. That's not why I asked.
So, but my point is that the self, the religion of the self, you fit right into that paradigm. When you study it as an academic, everything that you're saying goes along with the religion of the self. And that is the culture that we have been taught in our society. This idea of questioning the traditional narratives, the idea of questioning traditional authority, the idea of placing authority within yourself and allowing yourself to be the arbiter of truth.
What's wrong with that?
There's a lot wrong with that. I'll give you an example of what is wrong with that. Because when you say to yourself that I am the arbiter of truth, you cut yourself off from objective truth.
Oh, so there's objective truth?
Well, one second, bro. I'm having a conversation with this guy. So I'm inviting you to engage with evidence. Okay.
So you presented me one piece of evidence.
No. So
that you attain as an evidence.
So what is my argument?
What do you mean? What is your argument?
So I have presented you with an argument as to why what I've given you the delineation
that Jesus was prophesied.
I have given you the delineations of how we can understand things that are objective truth with a definition of what truth is. And then I have presented to you evidence that demonstrates that the Christian narrative corresponds with both history and prophecy.
So that's an objective truth.
So I'm inviting you to show me if I'm wrong in any way, where?
It's not about, this is what I mean, this is not a debate. I'm not here to come and debate you about where I stand. As you said, as you presented to me, that I'm a seeker, yeah? So you are a person who believes they obtain the truth, yeah?
I believe I stand within the truthful narrative of the Christian faith. Yeah.
Okay, so the Christian faith is the truth for you.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So to a person, it's not about stroking my ego. You know, I'm just another human being that you know. I've shown you my stages. I've shown you a very small element, and that's only because when we first spoke off camera, you asked me if I was a Christian as the first thing. And I said, well, no, I'm not a Christian. I said, I've grown up into Christianity. Yeah, I went to Christian schools. Okay. What is the question? Should be why was my faith distracted, or why wasn't I?
But if you remember, the invitation of this was for you to ask the questions that you. Sorry, the hay fever. Got hay fever.
No worries. Okay, so my questions are: there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me. Yeah.
Okay, now we're getting
within this is the reason why I don't say I'm a Christian.
So what
I
are
wouldn't
those
be
questions?
a follower of faith if I have to believe in what I'm following.
So what are those questions?
There's so many. Look, in regards to firstly the church. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the church, they say, is the
body of Christ.
Body of Christ. Jesus is the head of Christ.
Yeah.
Is the head of the church.
He's the head of the church. Yeah.
So now, they're saying that you must put your. Sorry. Do you know what? I really got to answer these phone calls because it's my work and I'm right in the middle of something. I'm not trying to run away from it. I promise you. You saw me on the phone prior to it. But so what I'm saying is for example, the church is, and everyone within the hierarchy of the church are the representatives of the Christian faith. Yeah?
Go on.
So when we see things, for example, you're here and other Christians are here, and if in Islam, for example, the head of the mosque or the head of the Islamic faith and the clergy of their faith were involved in sexual abuse with boys and what have you.
Yeah.
Would you, yes or no, use that as you said before? I have some things that I'm going to use to throw at the Islam.
It would depend whether.
Would it be sorry. Would it be something that you would use?
It would depend whether those things were being sanctioned by the Koran and the Hadiths.
Yeah.
So for instance, I wouldn't criticize Muslims because of suicide bombers. Because suicide bombers in and of themselves, I think, are contradicting what Islam teaches.
Absolutely.
Islam doesn't teach about suicide, and it certainly doesn't teach suicide as a way of killing other people. It does teach jihad, and it does teach violence. So I would criticize, based upon the actions of groups like ISIS, in comparison to the actions of, say, the Ottoman Empire, and a triangulation to Quranic teaching. I would use that to criticize.
Right.
But to deal with your point directly, people that try to attack the Christian faith because of the predatory paedophile rings that have set themselves up in the institution of the church, are not criticising the Christian faith, they're criticising the failure of the Christian institution, the church.
Yeah.
That's not a criticism of my faith,
I'm not saying
because
that.
my faith doesn't justify paedophilia.
Yeah.
And therefore, it isn't a fair criticism from anyone to attack the Christian faith because of paedophile priests.
Right.
There are good people and bad people. There are people following Christ and people not following Christ. And the Bible itself says that there will be people who claim to follow Christ, but Christ will say to them, I never knew you, away from you. So I would invite you not to judge the Christian faith based upon paedophile priests, but based upon Christ's teaching and Christ's person.
Yeah. So I agree with you to that, but what I'm trying to say is, it's as someone who walks into or you know, say I don't know of the faith, and I walk into it, and these are the things that I see. You see what I mean? These are the things that are going to distract people from their faith.
Can I suggest to you that the reason why you see them is because that is the thing that the liberal media presents to you. The liberal media, let's be honest, when was the last time you sat down and watched the BBC and the liberal media, or any liberal media, and the liberal media started to do cover stories about the great charitable work of the Salvation Army, or the fact that the Catholic Church is the largest NGO in the entire world, or the fact that Christians have contributed to reconciling the tribal groups in Rwanda that slaughtered one another after the genocide, or the fact that Christians were advocates all the way through the Troubles in Northern Ireland for an end to violence, that the Pope spoke against the IRA and called on Catholics not to take up arms against Protestants, and that Protestant pastors were calling upon Protestants not to take up arms against Catholics, or the fact that the Christian Church has fought for justice, established the welfare state, like William Temple did. You know, people who are confronted with these things that distract away from the Christian faith should first ask themselves, what is the agenda behind the maligning of the Christian community in the first place?
Yeah.
Why is it whenever you get a bishop on the BBC, the only topic of conversation is what do Christians think about homosexuality? Why is it never about any other topic?
But so what you're saying is to exercise critical thinking.
Yes.
And I'm exercising the same critical thinking about Christianity as I would with left liberal media. So it's the same. You can't tell me I can't be critical of Christianity.
No, I'm inviting you to be critical.
And this is what I'm trying to do.
I'm inviting you to be critical, and I'm inviting you to engage with the arguments and the evidence. Because I suggest to you, as a seeker, that there are very good reasons why you or anyone like you can become a Christian. But what I'm saying, but when you said that you find these things that you're encountering that are distracting you away from the Christian faith, and you use the example of paedophile priests, what I'm saying to you is the reason why you've got that category of mind, that you've got that perception, is because an anti-Christian media has given it to you, and you haven't yet freed yourself from the narrative that they've presented to you.
But then you could look at Christian media within America, you know, where they're, you know, putting their hands on people and they're warning off the demons and, you know, taking the demons away from them. You know, seeing that is quite, you know, for me, it's very questionable.
Right, bro. Again, firstly, I do believe in demon possession and I do believe in exorcism. Okay? However, I don't believe in chucking pearls before swine. I don't believe that we should be televising that and also using it as some kind of form of Christian entertainment. I think that is terribly distasteful. And I also think that a lot of American televangelists are not genuine representatives of the Christian faith.
But then they could say the same about you from a Christian perspective.
They can say whatever they like, but at the end of the day, you are then invited to ask who is standing upon historical Christianity. And prosperity teaching, kind of power evangelism that you see on things like the Christian channel are very poor reflectors of Christianity at a global level.
Okay, so the Pope is a poor reflector, the evangelicals...
Where did I say the Pope was a poor reflector?
All the Pope's clergy were. Essentially their doings shouldn't be...
All of them?
No, well, I don't know. The only ones that are shown are the ones who are caught. The ones who are not caught, we don't know.
But notice the narrative that's going on in your mind is, yes, we've got paedophile priests that need to be dealt with, but that's completely oblivious to the fact that there are many good priests doing much good work.
Absolutely.
But the thing that came to your mind...
No, this is the... So those elements... What you just said, there are good priests doing the work.
Yes,
that's in the good pot.
So should you?
So that's in the good pot for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't just hear. We're only going to speak about. I'm not here to speak about the things we agree on, isn't it? You know.
So let's cut past the good and the bad Christians and cut to what's really important.
Okay.
The teachings and the values of the Christian faith.
But then we have different denominations of Christianity.
All Christians agree that there is one God.
Okay.
All Christians agree that God is worshipped as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Okay.
All Christians agree that Christ was the divine Logos become flesh through the Virgin Mary. All Christians agree that he was crucified. All Christians agree that he was resurrected. All Christians agree that the Holy Spirit is with his church today. All Christians agree that Christ is returning. All Christians agree that there is a creator. So
what do they disagree on?
They disagree on secondary doctrine, like what is the politic of the church? What is the structure of the church? What is the highest authority within the church? You know, whether the sacraments are a vehicle of grace or whether they are simply symbols of grace. You know,
and how do they see the Pope as well, for example?
Different Christians have different views of the Pope.
Yeah.
My point to you, though, is that as someone who's a genuine seeker, right, cut past all the crap that the liberal media puts in your way, pick up a Bible, read the claims.
I have it by my bedside.
Brilliant. So read, right, so look at the claims.
Every day I read the Bible.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Until I will get to the end of it.
Right.
And this is what I'm trying to say to you. This is a person that is not, I'm not going to stand here and say, I picked up Matthew verse 12, chapter 30, and I'm going to dash that in your face because I don't believe that even means anything.
But what?
So for me, I want to read to the end. And I have read the Bible already, but I am now at a different stage of life.
Yeah.
I want to re-go through it again.
Fantastic.
Yeah? And if God permits me to write notes in it, which I do, and to circle certain elements.
Well, come with those notes and let's talk about them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm inviting you to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not. What I'm trying to point out is that there are narratives that I'm hearing from you that I hear from others.
Of course.
And I hear them from others because that is what society has taught them.
Yeah,
okay?
I'm sure it has.
Now, what I'm suggesting to you, I've given you 2 reasons to believe in Christ's crucifixion. 2 reasons to believe in Christ's crucifixion. I'm only talking about the crucifixion. We've not even got onto the resurrection yet.
Yeah.
Reason number 1, it's prophesied. And I've just shown you a prophecy in Isaiah. I'm going to show you another prophecy in the Psalms.
Yeah.
These were written by 2 different sources at 2 different times. And they're both pointing to the fact of the Messiah being crucified. Then you have the Gospels, which you're fully aware, they acclaim that Christ was crucified. And then you have the historians that come after the New Testament who confirm that Christ was crucified, bearing in mind that these prophecies could not have been fulfilled purely by Christ's own influence. It needed other people's cooperation. Other people needed to cooperate, which means that it wasn't in the power of Christ to manipulate the circumstance to get a result. So what we have are prophecies before the event, an account of the event, and confirmation of the event by other non-Christian sources outside of the New Testament,
and then
writing it.
After.
Yes.
Yeah.
That gives you good reason to believe that Christ was crucified. Which means, right, if you've got good reason to believe that Christ was crucified, you have good reason to not believe in anything that tells you different. And that is the difference between objective and subjective truth. So do you believe that Christ was crucified?
Okay, so the information that you've gathered is something that you've gathered.
Yes.
Okay, so when I go through that myself, you know, and to collaborate these historians,
Yes.
that you will give me the source to,
Yes.
then I can go about that myself, and then I can come to either the same conclusion as you,
Yep.
or not.
Brilliant.
Okay, but I'm not here to. I don't have an agenda like everyone else you see. I'm not here to break down what we're saying. This is not what
Fair
I'm
enough.
about. I
No one's
honestly
saying you are.
believe that we need to show the unity. Yeah.
Unity between who?
Unity between all humans. Okay, because look, these people that are who've grown into society with the lack of nurture, with the lack of love, the lack of care, inevitably turn into people that don't benefit society. Yeah, you see that all the time.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
Okay.
Because what that means is that we allow truth to be subject to political expediency. And you can't do that. If something is true, it is true. And if that truth is the source of a conflict, then so be it. But if you say that you're going to manipulate what you believe to be true simply and only to create social cohesion, then truth doesn't mean anything.
That's not what I mean.
So,
That's not what I mean.
when we have two truth claims that disagree with one another, right, there are going to be some people that are willing to fight for those truth claims, right? What are you going to do about that?
Well, it's as everyone does here, they discuss it and show their evidence and support their evidence and not try to necessarily manipulate or to coerce someone into believing it, is to, like you do, you know, like we show a piece of math, you know, when people come here and say, oh, flat earthers, they don't understand physics.
Yeah, well,
so,
there's lots they don't understand.
This is what I'm trying
flat
to say.
earthers are bonkers.
This is what I mean. So you have a lot of people that, but for me, maybe I'm wrong in believing that these people need some help.
Wait, but hold on one second.
Not just to say, okay, these guys are lost, and that's it, leave them lost.
But that's not a Christian attitude anyway. So whoever that applies to, it certainly doesn't apply to the Christians. Because Christians very much have as central to our narrative this idea of reaching out to the lost, reaching out to the people outside of the truth, and inviting them to see the truth for themselves, because we believe that that truth will set them free. And we believe that truth is found in Christ.
Okay.
Now, what I am trying to give you and everyone else who's watching this is a way that you can measure truth claims. A way that you can measure truth claims and thus delineate truth from falsehood. If something is true, evidence will support it because it will correspond to reality. If something is false, evidence will contradict it because it will contradict reality. Christ's crucifixion corresponds with every available evidence that we have.
Okay, so,
which means that any narrative or any doctrine that says Christ was not crucified is contradicting the truth and is thus a lie or an error built on a lie.
So, but say for example, as we find in a lot of research with different aspects of things, for example, they say that the Amazon is the lungs of the planet, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah? And that it gives us our breath. Do you believe this to be true?
No.
No.
I believe it gives us a lot of oxygen, but there's also a lot of oxygen that comes from plant inside the ocean. So
this is what I was going to say, is that for a long, long period of time, we believe the Amazon was the lungs of the earth.
Yes.
But essentially, what we've come to understand now is that the oxygen that the Amazon creates
is dwarfed by what comes out of the ocean.
It doesn't. No, it's not even dwarfed. It doesn't leave the Amazon because essentially it feeds whatever's the life. Because you see how much life form is within the Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but
so what I'm trying to say is that we, for a long, long time, believed that was the truth.
But now you're applying that to what my claims about the crucifixion. But the thing is,
not necessarily. I'm not applying that.
But you're saying that in a response to what you're saying that in a response to what I said about the crucifixion. And what I'm saying to you is that the claim about the crucifixion has stood up to 2,000 years of criticism. And the best time that anyone could have knocked down this idea, this belief, would have been right at the beginning. But no one ever tried to. No one ever tried to deny that Christ was crucified. They did try to deny the resurrection, but they didn't try to deny A, that his person existed, or B, that he was crucified.
And this resurrection, was it a physical resurrection?
We as Christians believe it was a physical resurrection.
So he died on the cross.
He died on a cross.
He woke up on the cross.
No, he didn't wake up on the cross.
Okay, so how can you explain to me the resurrection?
You've read the Gospels. You said you read the Bible. What does the Bible say?
Well, I don't remember that.
Fair enough. So what happened? Christ was crucified. His body was laid in a tomb, and then his tomb was discovered empty, and there were post-mortem experiences by his first followers where they claimed that they had seen him alive. And in their worldview, there was no possibility of this. There was no category of mind for this. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Say you're going down a motorway in the middle of the night and you see a light zooming across the sky, yeah? And then it stops and it disappears. One of the thoughts I imagine that will come into your head is it UFOs? Why? Because we've got this narrative permeating our society that we might have been visited by aliens. So we have a category of mind by which we can interpret an experience.
It's the same as a depiction of the devil. You close your eyes if you say to someone, what's the first thing that comes across in your mind when you say the devil? Most people will have the depiction of the Renaissance.
Yeah, exactly.
Depiction of the red devil.
You know, you got the red being with horns.
Yeah.
You say the devil, picture the devil, and that's what you get.
Yeah.
Because it's a category of mind by which you interpret experience.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Right. What I'm saying to you, as N.T. Wright observes, N.T. Wright is another first century historian. In first century Judaism, there was no category of mind for the idea that the Messiah would rise from the dead as an individual. There was no cultural expectation that this would happen. So when it happened, it exploded the categories of mind and created a new one. It creates a new narrative. Okay? Now, those first century Jews believed in a general resurrection, some of them, the Pharisees. But there were many Jews that didn't, like the Sadducees. That's why they're sad, you see. Sorry, it's an old Christian joke. I use it every time, I'm sorry.
And the Pharisees are fair, you see.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but the point is, when they had this experience of Christ rising from the dead, multiple, various, different experiences, both shared and individual, you, as a seeker, and I'm putting it to you as a question, are forced to ask the question, why? Now, I will entertain any hypothesis you wish to give, and I'll discuss it with you objectively, on the condition that you will seriously consider the hypothesis that it was a real experience rooted in a real event.
I'm not, this is what I'm trying to say, it's not the question, it's not always the question of why for me.
Yeah.
It's, how I put together, not, as you said, a seeker. I'm a seeker of truth, yeah?
I get that.
And what I'm saying to you is, what you said, I was someone who believes in the self or what have you. It's not necessarily that belief. It's the belief that, like most of us share as children of this world. When we go to sleep, we're alone and we speak. We all have had this thing where we spoke to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we didn't get that answer.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that is how we're meant to communicate with God, but you've got to understand that everyone has very similar experiences as human beings.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And then we go through all these points. So there are stages in my life that maybe it was never nurtured. This religious aspect was never nurtured.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
and a Christian school, for sure, is not necessarily the best place to have it nurtured. In fact,
you have a lot of
quite
children,
the opposite.
Quite the opposite, yeah. So this is not, for me, I'm against a lot of institutions, okay? Not because it's a liberal way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's because I see how it's detrimental. You know, I see the effects of what it has, yeah? But what I'm saying is, in regards to, I'm not necessarily, you know, look, these things about the Christian church, I'm not happy about.
We're putting that to one side because we've already agreed that isn't the way to measure truth.
For sure. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm about to agree with that point there, yeah? Is that I'm not using that as, I'm not going to get with church or get with Christianity because these popes do these bad things and they shouldn't be. I don't believe in that. I'm trying to seek the truth of what makes sense. Yeah?
I agree. This is a good way to approach things.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying to you, and we're just using the historical argument about the crucifixion, corresponding to the argument from prophecy. Now, just think for it, right? I just want to show you another prophecy. Okay. So this was the Psalms of David. The Psalms of David predate the prophecy we found in Isaiah, in Isaiah 53. Okay, so this predates it. And what's really interesting is that Psalm 22 also predates the invention of crucifixion itself. Crucifixion was invented by the Persians. It was then mastered by the Romans.
And it wasn't always a cross like that. Sometimes they had two. That's why you have several depictions of different crosses.
But the Persian Empire invented crucifixion after the Psalm. And if you read this in its entirety, and I invite you to read Psalm 22, and then I invite you to read the Gospel passages about the crucifixion of Christ, and do that with Isaiah 53 and read the crucifixion in the Gospels, right? And I just want to zoom in on this bit, okay? Right? I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. When you're being crucified, you die through asphyxiation. You literally have to pull yourself up, yeah? But when they're crucifying you, they have to stretch your arms.
Don't they have a little stand for your feet?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Depends how generous they wanted to be, the executioners. But sometimes they would have to pull your arms and legs to stretch them out before they nailed them in, and often that led to dislocation. Okay? Okay? My heart is waxed within me, it is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. And obviously through the process of crucifixion you lose your strength. Yeah? The heart is under massive pressure. It starts to trifibulate. Is trifibulate the right word? Yeah, it starts to trifibulate. Yeah. My strength is dried like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaws because of all that deep breathing in the hot sun. Yeah, you end up with dry mouth, your tongue starts sticking to the top of your jaw. You lay me in the dust of death, for dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. This is before crucifixion. This is before the Persians even invented crucifixion. David is writing around 1000 BC. Crucifixion was invented hundreds of years later. And they're talking about a man who is being crucified. His hands and his feet are being pierced.
So what do you think the Jews think that means?
It's a good one to talk to Jews about, because it clearly they would say that this is not a prophecy of the Messiah.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
but why? If that's so clear
because
to you
exactly.
and so clear to I...
Exactly. And but the thing you've got to remember is the people that wrote the Gospels were all Jews.
Yeah.
The first Christians were all Jews. So the argument from Jewishness, or what do the Jews say, is a ridiculous argument to use against the Christians, because the first Christians were all Jews. So we have the opinion of the Jews. That's what our entire religion is built upon, the opinion of Jews. So all it ends up is being an argument between this Jew and that Jew. So, you know, which Jew do you want to believe in? Peter or the Jews today?
Well, it's not about that. It's the critical part of it. You know,
yes, it's the critical part of it.
I would like to know what they perceive that passage.
Well, there are Jews to talk to in the park.
Yeah,
but let's be clear. The argument from saying, well, what do the Jews think about this passage?
Yeah, no, it's not
doesn't work for us.
No, it's not an argument.
But what I'm saying is it does not work for us as Christians, because all our initial texts were written by Jews.
Yeah.
So it is simply a case of this Jew disagrees with that Jew. But the question is, which Jew was there at the time? That's our Jews, just for the record.
And what about like the apocryphas and stuff like that? you know,
the apocryphal books.
Yes.
Like Esther and 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees. Thomas, right? Yes. Okay.
Thomas is an important one for me because I find there's a lot of. I like the words in it. It really speaks to me, a lot of the words of Thomas.
The reason why we as Christians reject Thomas is because it wasn't known to the church. It emerged hundreds of years after the events. It comes around between the second. It becomes around the 3rd century.
But then some people say that it was kept. It was almost like a secret that was kept, sort of thing.
Yeah, and they've got no historical reason for saying that.
Yeah.
It is just a modern myth.
But can you see how sometimes?
But what can you see that if a book comes in the 3rd century, so that's between the years 200 to 300.
But it does correlate with the time.
Really doesn't. Really doesn't. It gets so much wrong. If I'm not mixing it up with something else, and I might be mixing it up with something else, it gives a description of the crucifixion or the resurrection, which talks about the cross coming out of the tomb and speaking.
No, that's not Thomas.
Or is that maybe that's the apocryphal? Maybe that's an apocryphal Peter.
Yeah.
But either way, the Gospel of Thomas is a Gnostic gospel that comes hundreds of years. It has been discounted by every historian of antiquity as being a relevant record to the life of Jesus. Bart Ehrman, when he wants to look at the life of Jesus, he goes to the Gospels and the letters of Paul. He doesn't go to the Gospel of Thomas.
No, I know that.
The Church Fathers, Irenaeus, he quotes all 4 Gospels, but he never quotes the Gospel of Thomas. The Church Father Ignatius quotes all 4 Gospels, but he doesn't quote the Gospel of Thomas. Now, the very first generation of Christians, Ignatius, Irenaeus, Polycarp, all of these church fathers, they're quoting the gospel that we have. They never quote the Gospel of Thomas. Why? Because it wasn't there to quote.
What about the likes of Enoch, for example?
The Book of Enoch.
Okay, so I understand why the Book of Enoch was eradicated, even by the Jews too.
It wasn't eradicated.
Well, it was taken out. Is it not a part of the Apocrypha?
I believe that Ethiopian Christians, and I'm willing to be corrected if someone wants to correct me, but I believe that the Ethiopian Christians use the Book of Enoch.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Well, it means that some Christians accept it as no, well, they are connected to the Coptic Church, but it means that some Christians accept the Book of Enoch.
Okay, so what I'm trying
if
to
I'm
say
right,
is
I might be wrong.
There's a Book of Enoch, right?
Yeah.
Which explains, but this is not in the Bible. Such, yeah.
It's not in the Western European Church's Bible.
But then when I looked at Enoch himself, I thought, well, he sounds like quite an important figure.
He is an important figure.
In regards to, he was the only one to walk with God, was it?
No, there's many people in the Bible that have walked with God. Adam and Eve walked with God, though that's mythology. Yeah. Jacob wrestled with God. Abraham walked with God.
So why is it not?
The apostles walked with God. Loads of people in the Bible walk with God. Yeah. God's walking with people all the time. Do you know why? Because our God can enter into history. He can enter into time and space. He's not a limited God, like, say, for instance, the God of the Muslims, who's a God that can't do everything, but claims to be all-powerful. Our God is all-powerful and can enter into his creation.
Have you ever heard of that thing where they say, if God is all-powerful, can he create a weight
that he can't lift?
That he can't lift.
Yeah, but such statements are nonsensical.
Why are they nonsensical?
Because they within the statement of the question is an irreconcilable contradiction. Because if you're saying, can he create a weight that he can't lift, and is he all-powerful, what you've created is a rational contradiction between two positions that you can't rationalise and you can't reconcile.
Well, for me, I sort of wrestled with this idea, because it sounded quite funny. You know, to me, it was kind of like, okay, that's.
I think it's wordplay.
It is kind of wordplay,
but it's what we call. I think it's called soloquism or sophism, where it is just the use of language for its own sake. It doesn't actually say anything meaningful. What would be a meaningful statement would be, what is the impact of God entering into his creation? Because if your God can enter into creation, then he can communicate with you. If he can't enter into his creation, he can only send representatives. That means that When you've got a God that only can speak to you through representatives, you can never get to know God, only a description of God. But if God can enter into his own creation, you can get to know God. God can get to know you. That means that you can have a real relationship with God.
And can you have that same relationship without believing that Jesus is the Son of God?
I believe as a Christian that the only way to know the Father is through Jesus Christ.
Okay. But what you just said is that you can have a relationship with God, yeah?
Yes.
But can you have that same relationship, and how would you be able to measure it? You know, so if I was to say, for example, for argument's sake, I have a good relationship with God, or I have a relationship.
Yes.
And you say, well, I have also a relationship with
yes.
God. And then but I say, but how are we ever going to test and measure?
So that's a fair question. It's a very fair question. And let me say that I would be the first to say that people can have a relationship to God outside of the church.
Yeah. Because an Eskimo would never have seen.
Well, exactly, because we believe that God's Spirit is the one that converts people, which means that God is acting on people's hearts and minds even before they become Christian. So you obviously can have a relationship with God before you become a Christian. And to what degree you can grasp the truth, and God is the fountain of all truth, he is the very paramount, the pyramid of truth. To what degree you engage with the truth, that objective truth, that real reality that underpins everything, then you can claim to have a relationship with God. But the true measure, the measuring stick of that relationship is how well do you know Jesus? Because Jesus is the perfect representation of the Father. When you see Jesus, you see in human form, you see what the Father looks like. And thus, for you to be closest to God, you have to be closest to Jesus.
Why do we... There's a question from the child.
Forgive
the child for asking it.
No, there's no offence with the child.
Is that God is related to the Father of the sky? You know, he's the Father. Why is it a male? You know, some people, I've heard someone say, there's no other way. It's not going to be. It's just you know.
Let me address that.
Can't we just never say God again? Because if we're talking about language again, this is a matter of language.
And absolutely, and it is all connected to the sort of postmodern movements within our society and the deconstruction of language and so on and so forth. So when God was speaking, he was speaking to patriarchal society. He was speaking at one of the earliest stages of man, and so he uses the languages appropriate to the time. However, Christians have zero authority to rewrite Jesus' teaching. Jesus addresses the Father as his Father. He shows God as his Father to Israel, as the Father of Israel, and so it is the only way as Christians that we can address God. And that's based upon whether you are willing to accept the authority of Christ. And if Christ rose from the dead, then his authority has the stamp of divine approval, which means his teachings has the stamp of divine approval. And we as Christians simply accept it, and we are proud of it. We don't need to change our faith to fit with modern culture and modern concerns about egalitarianness of language. Okay? The Bible says mankind. That's how you translate adwama, mankind. But that doesn't mean that women are excluded. God is Father.
Human, woman.
Exactly, but Jesus says, this is Jesus speaking. He addresses God as Father, he calls us to address God as Father. We have no option to do otherwise. But he uses feminine descriptions at times in the scriptures. He said, "O Jerusalem, how I have wished to gather you like a hen under my wings." Now, does that mean that we have legitimacy now to call God Mother? No. But what it shows is that God is someone that transcends these masculine, feminine languages. And we shouldn't read that God has a gender.
So do you think, like, for someone, I spoke to a friend who was, what it makes kind of sense is that God creates humans, God created all of us, right? And then there's all these religions. Is it a game? Is this a game? Is it, you know, like,
No, it's a war.
It's a war, yeah. So it's like
It's a
God
war.
created a war, like
No,
Gabe.
God did not create the war. The ones that created the war are the demons who prowl this earth seeking the ruin of souls, and the way that they seek the ruin of souls is to lie. And the best lies are always those that imitate the truth, and the devil has been getting better at lying down through the ages. And by far his best lie is the one that says he doesn't exist. You know? So, bro, I'm going to leave you, I want to give you a gift. You've got a Bible, so I'm not going to give you another Bible. But I just want to give you a gift. Yeah, the basic elements of the Christian life. Just for your edification.
Yes, sir.
Come and talk.
Can I come back for volume 2?
Absolutely you can. I welcome it. You look after yourself. Yeah, keep studying the Bible, write down your questions, and then we'll talk some more.
Thank you very much.
God bless. Yeah, do you want to talk some more with him?
Earlier on you mentioned something regarding the Christianity and the followers as Christians.
Yeah.
Just to tell you exactly what's happening, just for the information. I'm one of the oldest Christians possibly on earth, yeah, I'm Syrian, and I speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus.
Amazing.
Yeah. When I came to the West, I was shocked by the system. Sorry?
My dad speaks Arabic.
Is he Syrian?
He's partly Syrian.
Right, he's my brother. Right? Look, when I saw the form of Christianity in London, West, right, it was hard to swallow. The first time I was invited to one of the, I think it was the evangelist churches here in jail. Honestly, I was insulted because I woke up, I get up and sort of left the thing, and I said, I'm not here, I didn't come to a nightclub, yeah? That was an insult to my belief, because what's happening,
What did you see?
Well, basically, like the music, I'm not, fully against all that, but in some of the churches I've seen the devil deceiving people. If you give £50, you will have.
Yeah, this prosperity gospel is not the gospel. That is not the gospel. Prosperity gospel is not the gospel.
No, that was the thing that I used to question as a child as well.
Brother, I'm going to go. I'm going to let you guys chat. Peace be with you. Christ is risen. It's a real pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure too.
We'll talk some more. Come back for volume 2. Yeah, have a good day.
I may come with some more challenges.
Yeah, bring your questions, read the Bible, right? Bring us your Bible with all your notes and we'll talk about it. All right, God bless. God bless. Right. Yeah, we'll do a wrap-up. Raul, we're going to do a wrap-up. So, what we've got, guys, is the fact that as Christians, we have allowed the media to throw obstacles in front of people's faces. We need to cut past all the crap about these Christians have done that and these Christians have done that, and bring people back to looking at Jesus and the claims about Jesus himself. If Christ is prophesied in the Old Testament, and those prophecies are fulfilled in the person of Christ as evidenced by the New Testament gospel writing, and then independently by non-Christians, those same claims are verified by historians, people have a good reason, a good benchmark to understand what is a truth claim. Truth claims are not subjective things. There are some truth claims that are subjective. I may like a cheeseburger, you may not like a cheeseburger. Those claims are true, but they are subjective. It's a matter of taste. But things to do with history are subject to inquiry, and those historical inquiries can give us a measure of knowing the truth. The Christian faith makes truth claims about Jesus that corresponds with history. It corresponds with prophecy, and any truth claim about Jesus that contradicts both the prophecy and the history is a truth claim that is evidently false. And we Christians need to re-galvanize ourselves to stand confidently in our truth. Because people like this brother are walking away from the Christian faith for reasons of poor discipleship, because of the fact that a Christian identity is not being imbued within his heart, is not being cultivated within his inner man, and it is simply being reduced to a series of claims that get knocked down very quickly by the secular world, because we're not teaching our children how to defend that worldview, how to defend that identity. So wake up, brothers and sisters. Wake up, because the church in the West is in full retreat, and it will continue to do so until we change the culture within the church. What time is it?
That is now. Stop recording now. Turn back on. It's 4:30 and he's coming back. Looks like Jason's coming back from Luton now.
Right, I'm going soon.
Leo, let me see your eyes. Now let me see how your ones go. Your eyes are fucked, مع الاسف يعني عندك الكراهيه مع انك انت يعني عندك كراهيه للعرب. Easy.
Let me get it.
Quran specifically is from God. It's literally all the books. All the books. Okay. So inside the Quran, as I understand the Islamic position, the Quran is infallible, without error or contradiction. Is that fair? Am I misrepresenting the Islamic position? Fair enough. He doesn't want to. I'm just asking you about your deen as Muslim.
As a deen, yes.
I'm just asking you about your deen as Muslim. I want to make sure that I'm working from a correct premise. Is the Quran an infallible book? Is it? What?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course. It is an infallible book. Now, if I said to you that Muhammad, was born in Petra, you would say that that's historically wrong, correct?
Absolutely.
Why is it historically wrong?
Because it's in the wrong place.
It's in the wrong place. Why do we know it's in the wrong place?
Because that's what he told me.
Okay, let me... I want to help. The reason why we know it would be the wrong place is because the historical documents are clear that Muhammad was born in Mecca.
Absolutely.
So you'd be arguing against the historical evidence, right? Right. So we've established a principle by which we can judge a truth claim or not. If I said that Muhammad was an Egyptian, would you say that's true or false?
Absolutely.
Absolutely false. Why would you say it's absolutely false? Why is it not true?
Because it's not what the history says.
Because it's not what the history says. So we've established a principle. If I said that the Arabs the Muslims never had an empire. They never conquered their surrounding nations. Would you say that's true or false?
Yeah, go on.
Is this a history lesson?
Right.
Go on.
So,
Where's the question?
my point to you is the man that a minute ago didn't want to speak, but now suddenly does.
No, I want to get the point. I don't want to discuss.
So what we've established,
yeah, I know.
what we've established, yeah, make sure that we can get in the feet. Yeah. So,
make sure you get his feet.
Yeah, make sure we can get our feet. So what we've established is that if someone makes a truth claim about history, and all the evidence contradicts that history, we have a reason to say whether something is true or false or not. So, the Koran makes certain claims about history that are factually false. They are factually in error. And I'm going to give you one example. I'm just about to. Go on. I just want to make sure that you follow the line of argument that I'm making. Remember, when I said all those false things about Muhammad, you said it was wrong because it contradicted the known history. Well, the Quran makes claims that contradicts known history, and I'm going to share with you now. So, now, does anyone here know what happened to the Jewish temple?
No, tell us about
what Jewish temple?
The Jewish temple, the first century Jewish temple.
No, tell us about it. Educate.
You are?
Educate us about it.
It was destroyed.
By who?
Where about?
By the Romans in 70 AD.
Where, in Palestine?
In Israel, yeah.
Palestine?
Yeah, in Israel.
In Palestine.
Palestine.
So, now, it says in the Quran that Muhammad went to visit the farthest mosque. Explain to me, how could there be a mosque in Jerusalem before the Muslims conquered Jerusalem?
Sorry?
You weren't paying attention. Maybe you can answer.
No, go on, repeat it so can share it.
You heard the question.
Yeah, go on.
No, you heard the question.
Please, no, do it. I just want them to share it with me.
He's not going to talk.
No, he will.
No, bro.
He will talk.
Bro, just answer the question.
He will talk.
All together, I'll answer.
Some weird
Okay, now let me ask this brother, since he's the only one that wants to answer the question. The Quran says, glory to Allah, who did take his servant for a journey by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, whose precincts we did bless. How could there be a mosque in Jerusalem before the Muslims conquered Jerusalem? It didn't exist. There was no mosque.
So, hold on a second. The temple was the Jews? Temple of the Jews?
The temple belonged to the Jewish people. It was a Jewish faith. It was built by Herod.
They're not actually called Jewish. Israelites.
Whatever you want to term them as.
Israelites, yes.
Whatever you want to term them as. Just because I don't want to get caught up on pedantics, let's call them Israelites. So they had the temple. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. There was no religious building in Jerusalem at the site that you now know as the Dome of the Mosque. That mosque in Jerusalem, the one that Muhammad journeyed to. There was no such building, but the Quran says that there was. That is a historical error par excellence. How does an infallible book talk about something factually false? I think the silence speaks for itself.
We're just fasting, we don't want to waste our time.
You don't want to waste your time, you just
we
want
don't
to
want
stand
to get
here
hit
and
with your
listen to it.
books.
You just want to stand here and listen
We're
to
protecting ourselves.
Fair enough.
We just want to hear your fairy tale, so carry on.
Fair enough.
It's killing time.
Yeah, killing time. So answer me. What was the building that was being referred to?
Do you have another story for us?
Do you not want to answer the question about...
I just want to listen like I told you. But
Tell me.
Tell us another story.
Tell me, what was the building that was being referred to in this passage?
Again, if you can go a story, I'm going to go find a story elsewhere. Do you have another story for us?
No, not for you. Not for you. So notice, they don't have an answer. The Quran says something that is factually false. It speaks about a building that does not exist. it says that there was a mosque in Jerusalem. No such building existed. It is historically in error. That's the first one. Let's find some more Muslims. Let's ask them about other historical errors in the Quran. Hi guys, I hear you. I'm taking a guess. I might be wrong. Oh, are you Muslim? Oh, are you Muslim? Yes, there's another historical error. Yes. The Alaska Mosque was built after the time of the conquest of Jerusalem. It was within the first generation. They conquered Jerusalem and then they built a mosque. But the fact of the matter is that no such mosque existed at the time that Muhammad was supposedly going there. And the Quran says he visited a mosque. It doesn't say that he visited a temple.
I was going to give you a reference to the Hadith, but I have to take time to check it out.
That's fine.
They asked Muhammad in the Hadith, and this can be verified, the Soka might send it to you guys. It says, they asked the Prophet Muhammad which was the first mosque, and he said Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he said which was the second mosque, and I think he referred to the mosque in Mecca.
Right.
I can't remember the name of it. I don't want to time. Then he said that, what was the distance of time between the building of both mosques? He said 40 years.
Right.
So that is why I wanted to bring this up. So
well, that's a massive historical contradiction.
I'll get the reference now.
Send it to JC. So the fact of the matter is, if Muslims are saying that this is an infallible book, why does it get its history wrong? Did God not know his history? If he knew his history, why is he making such historical blunders? Saying that there was a mosque in Jerusalem is like saying that there was a Walmart. Wouldn't say that there was a Walmart in first century Rome. So why does Allah say that there's a mosque in Jerusalem? But it gets worse. And I just want to find some Muslim to speak to about how worse it gets.
What's the definition of mosque?
So,
what's the definition of mosque?
A place of worship.
Yeah. Well, a place of worship. You know, it's a place of worship defined in the Islamic way.
It's a okay. Well, how would you define it?
No. Define a mosque mean anywhere.
A mosque is a place where Allah is worshipped.
No, it's God who's worshipped. It's not
Allah.
No, God.
Allah.
You're a dictator.
Who's God?
You're a dictator.
Who's God?
Allah.
Your God or my God?
For everybody.
They're not the same.
No, God for
They're not the same.
universe.
Yahweh and Allah or Muhammad are not the same.
You are fanatic.
Yahweh and Allah are not the same.
Listen, man, you know what I mean? You're not an educated person. Because if you know the literature, if you go to university, first thing in a word, when you take a word, you have to explain it technically and linguistically. You can't mix that between Arab language and English language.
So you don't like my definition?
No, you're not educated. Just like
so what's your definition?
That's not my definition.
What's your definition?
Scholars' definition.
What is your definition?
It's Scholars' definition. If you listen, if you want to discuss with me, discuss me. If you want to just dictate on me, I don't like it. You know what I mean? I'm coming from St. Augustine, ancestry. Who teach you a Catholic in your country?
Okay, what's your definition?
St. Augustine. Definition what?
A mosque.
A mosque. A place, any place.
Yes,
any place.
yes.
Even where Muslims pray to God.
Right. Okay, did you hear that? You just said that a mosque is a place where God is worshipped, any place where God is worshipped. When Muhammad went on his night journey to Jerusalem, where was this place of worship that he went to? What? Petra.
What's been Petra?
It's by Jordan, Amman, Jordan.
I don't know where exactly Petra. How do you know?
In the Quran, that's in the Quran.
He said Petra. He mentioned Petra. In the Quran, he mentioned Petra. Go back here.
Bro, I'm asking you.
Nonsense,
I agree. There's 1 second.
He said
where did Muhammad go?
He said they said somewhere.
I'm asking you.
They said somewhere.
A simple question.
I'm trying to translate from Arabic.
Where did he go?
It's like Masjid Aqsa. Aqsa, you mean?
Aqsa Mosque.
Aqsa Mosque.
In where?
Somewhere in Jerusalem.
Right. Do you actually know, right, where that mosque is? Do you know it? Do you know where the location of that mosque is?
I've never been there. I'm not from there.
Right. It's considered to be on the
Have you
Temple
been there?
Mount. No, I'm just talking about general knowledge.
Yeah, okay.
Al-Aqsa Mosque is generally thought to be on the Temple Mount.
Who said the Temple Mount?
That's just commonly known, sir.
No, it's not commonly known.
Maybe not to you.
Yeah, that's not.
Maybe not
that's
to you.
You invented.
Well, Google fact check me.
Google is not. It's not.
Fact check me.
It's not. No, it's not Google.
So, what I'm saying is, bro.
See, I have to learn to educate yourself.
Because here's the thing that you're not
You're
listening
not
to.
theologian because you're saying common knowledge.
It is common
I disagree with you.
You just don't know.
I study philosophy.
You just don't know.
I'm studying philosophy. I'm pragmatist guy.
Sir, are you a
I
Muslim?
this course. Excuse me?
I'm asking you if you're a Muslim.
Well, I'm talking about Islam now.
Well, you could...
I'm theologian and philosopher.
Right.
I'm Muslim. You know the father who in the civilization of the West, even a Muslim from North Africa.
Do you believe this book is infallible?
So, are you questioning me now? I'm questioning. Can you talk about a place about worship in Islam?
Yes.
What means
There is a mosque that has been referred to in Surah 17. Using your definition. Using your definition. Your definition is a place where God is worshipped. So which place did Muhammad go to in Jerusalem?
Anywhere someone doing
The Al-Aqsa Mosque is meant to be on
What's
the
your
Temple
point?
Mount.
What's your point? I mean, I don't understand the way you
Well, if you'd actually stop interrupting, you might get to my point, but you
you're
keep
talking,
interrupting.
you're preaching, you're not lecturing, you're not discussing. Go to your point.
Because you just jumped in and you're just interrupting, sir. So, let's be clear. Muslims themselves say that Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the Temple Mount.
Listen,
that building did not exist at the time of Muhammad. So which building did he go to?
You're not educated. I'm telling you from that. This guy, you have no education. You are very allowed. Go to university, do theology, that thing. Come back when you know how to discuss. You don't have definitions. You don't have the definition between
We have the definition here. We have it here for you. I'll just wait for you. It shows you the distance of time which mosque was made.
Allah's not God.
40-year period between them.
Okay.
Allah's not God.
So basically, Brother Yaqub, once again, with his knowledge of hadiths, has just made the Muslim position even worse. Because Sahih al-Muslim 520, Book 5, Hadith 1, Book 4, Hadith 1056, okay, says this. Abu Dar reported, I said, Messenger of Allah, which mosque was set up first on earth? He said, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the sacred, that's the one in Mecca. I again said, then which next? He said, it was the Masjid Aqsa, thank you. I again said, how long the space of time between their setting up? He, the Holy Prophet, said, it was 40 years.
40 years.
What does it mean?
That contradicts everything we know about history.
Everything.
The first temple of Solomon was set up. The first temple of Solomon was set up over 1,000 years ago. Which means that there was a city called Mecca with a mosque over 1,000 years before Christ. Over 1,000 years before Christ, it's contradicting everything we know about history. I study history, sir. I study history.
It's a contradiction.
No, the contradiction is that your prophet has just said, yes, certainly, your prophet has just said that a mosque was built in Mecca 1,000 years before Christ, and that another mosque was then built in Jerusalem. Where is the evidence?
Okay, I'll ask you this question.
Where's the evidence?
History.
Where's the evidence?
History. Is it history?
Oh, he's back.
History.
I have another question for you.
I told you.
I got another story. I got another story for you.
Is it history?
Another fable from your Koran.
Is it history exact science?
Exact in the sense of a physical science.
Bob, you've done it twice. Bob, you've done it twice, Bob.
Listen, when you study logic, you have to have, some thing to start from. It have to be absolute facts. History is not absolute fact. You started because you didn't go to university.
Are you going to actually address the argument?
I'm asking you about that. You have no
Address
argument.
the
You have no
argument.
because you don't have no fundamental.
You can insult me as much as you like,
Tell me principle
but address the argument.
Because you say it's wrong.
Was there
It's
a
wrong.
mosque
No,
in Mecca 1,000 years before Christ? Yes or no?
Yes. If the prophet said so, it's yes. Because it's a prophet.
Right.
You're not.
The evidence contradicts
History
you.
has nothing to do.
The evidence contradicts you.
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? What
The evidence
about?
contradicts
Past or
you.
future? Or your present?
Where are the first
I'm
records of
asking you,
Mecca being
what-
talked about?
What evidence they talk about? Past
Where are
evidence.
the first
From past.
evidences of
Evidence.
Mecca being talked
The
about?
evidence. It's not important for me, my car. It's not
Where-
important for me
where?
anyway. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
Where?
It doesn't matter.
Right?
It doesn't matter about the principle.
Mecca
About
is a late
how
city
you
in
argue,
antiquity.
How you argue? You don't have no
Possibly
basic of logic.
an
You have
early
no analysis.
medieval city.
You're just talking. Try to educate yourself. You
Anyway,
don't know-
bro, have a
you
good
know-
day. I'm going to go find
That's
someone who
guys-
can have a
That's
conversation.
guy, you don't have no principle
Sir,
of mind.
are you a
You
Muslim?
don't know nothing about what you're talking.
Are you a Muslim, sir?
Why do you ask me?
Doesn't
Because
matter.
I want to ask questions about the Quran.
Yeah, I forget this
You
guy.
want to
I want
ask
to ask
me
questions.
about Quran?
Yes.
Why would you ask me?
Because I'm asking, you might be a Muslim.
No.
Do you notice the guy just called me a racist?
Yeah, you are racist.
I'm a racist because I criticise their Quran,
it's not, because
and
you are-
in his logic
Trust
that
me,
makes
trust
me a
me,
racist.
trust me. Wait, you know why-
Leon,
why racist?
does that make me a
Just what
racist?
you make me racist. Know what you make me racist?
Did you just nudge your hangers?
You know why I make you racist?
Why am I a
Because You're not
racist?
educated. You're not.
Oh,
you're not.
so a
You're
racist is
ignorant.
someone who's not educated.
Yeah, same like you.
I see.
Tell us what
I
you know
see.
about Quran. Let's see.
So,
maybe it will be
Look at
something
yourself,
interesting.
man.
let's look at another example of the errors of the Quran. The historical errors of the Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand up if you know the first references to chainmail. You know that armour, the armour that people wear of rings of steel bound together. When and where was it invented? It was invented by the Persians around the 6th century BC. BC.
You don't have to understand words.
Some people try to argue. Some people try to argue that chainmail was invented by the Celts.
No, if you look in the Quran, it
But
says, it says Solomon
we
had
have
chainmail.
examples.
Chainmail didn't exist.
Okay, guys, I'm going to step that way a bit. If you want to listen to me, follow me. If you want to listen to them, stay here.
Go back to school, mate. You know what I mean? Go educate yourself.
So-
you have to pronounce any word. Not English.
We have examples of Macedonians, Celts, and Persians and Romans all using chainmail. Our earliest evidence of chainmail existing comes from the Persian Empire around the 6th or 7th century. King David lived 1,000 years before Christ. The Persians were 600 or 700 years before Christ. My numbers may be slightly off, I'm doing this from memory.
Bob's going for it.
However, you can check to see if what I'm saying is true. Google me now to find out what was the earliest reference to chainmail. And you will see that it was before King David. At the time of King David, the armour that was used was plate armour supplemented by thick leather armour. That is a historical fact. A historical fact that this so-called infallible book gets entirely wrong. It gets it entirely wrong. Because this book was written in the 7th century AD by a man familiar with chainmail, but who did not know the history of antiquity and the history of the Bronze Age. So, what I am referring to, listen carefully. This is in the Quran, Surah 34, Ayah 10 and Ayah 11, as translated by a Muslim linguist called Yusuf Ali. So this is a Muslim translation of their own holy book. And it says the following: we bestowed grace aforetime on David. On who? On who? Speak up, brother. On who?
Jesus was murdered.
Speak up. On who?
David.
David.
As only
From
one God.
ourselves.
And his name is...
O you mountains, sing ye back the praise of Allah with him, and ye birds also, and we made the iron soft for him.
Hallelujah. Hey,
commanding, listen carefully, make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings,
is allowed.
Rings
It's
of
freedom.
chain armor, a very lucid,
It's freedom of speech.
a very clear description of chainmail ascribed to David hundreds of years before chainmail ever existed. You don't believe me, O Muslims?
Get away from
Go
religion.
and check
Our
my
religion.
facts. The Quran
Get
gets
away
it
from
wrong.
Christianity.
The
And the
Quran
and the right.
is in error. The Quran
It's all
gets
brainwashing.
its history
It's all
wrong.
brainwashing. They want
No.
a man to be like a sheep.
Why
Just
as
follow
a
us.
Christian?
You have no
Why,
history.
as a Christian,
no evidence of your God.
am I pointing this out?
Your God was killed.
Why don't I talk about
Jesus was
Christianity?
Was
Well,
murdered.
I do talk about Christianity
Cristo, Cristo.
all the time.
Cristo
However,
Ramadan. He was
Muslims
killed.
in the park often spend their time attacking the Christian faith, which invites me as a Christian to attack the Quran.
Yeah.
Now, Muslims say, not Christians, Muslims say that this book is perfect in every way.
Well, your book is not perfect.
Without
And their book is not
contradicting
perfect.
history
All full of
or science.
horrible errors.
So when
all your books,
the Quran,
the Bible and the
contradicts
Quran
history,
are full of so many
it is
crazy
fair
mistakes.
for me to point out that error.
You have to be fair. Don't just
To
condemn
point out
the book
the
of the
fact
Muslim. You
that
have
the
to condemn your
Quran
book as well.
gets its history
You have
wrong.
no evidence whatsoever.
And if it
Your
gets its
religion
history wrong,
is not true one.
then the Muslims
is
who
false.
say that this
Your
book
Jesus
is perfect
was murdered.
have now a good reason not to believe.
You believe what?
Not to believe.
You are
No,
sir. You were a bunch of criminals.
Do
used
you
to
have
cut the throat
anything
of
to say about
anyone
the
against
argument?
You. All the churches, they still, now I'm glad it's only when people they like to celebrate, then they have to do, and still going down. Church is still going, only foreigners.
Nothing.
It's
It's got nothing to say
no English.
about the error
How could you
of
believe?
the Quran.
Believe what? Believe what?
Come, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So the error is this, sir.
What's about Christianity?
King David, you know who David was?
David, he was a...
I'm going to. The error is this.
No, you've got it wrong.
King David
You've got it wrong, my friend.
lived 1,000 years before Christ.
David,
Chainmail was invented
David
700
was
years before Christ.
He was a peasant Hebrew.
In other words,
from
hundreds
Judea.
of years
He was from Judea,
after
David. That's why-
David
yeah.
lived. The Quran contradicts history. Because the Quran says this. Listen carefully. We bestowed grace aforetime on David. Who are we talking about?
David,
say it again.
The son of.
Shout like you've got a pair. Who? David. Sir, who are we talking about?
David.
David. O ye mountains, sing ye back praise of Allah with him, and ye birds, and we made the iron soft for him. Commanding who? Who's being commanded? David is being commanded. Make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings of chain armour. That's chainmail armour. Chainmail armour did not exist at the time of David. Muhammad got his history wrong.
Muhammad, it was a pig.
Why did Muhammad get his history wrong? He got his history wrong.
And Mark, he was Romano.
Because he lived in the 7th century.
Greco-Roman.
In the 7th century, chainmail was everywhere. Everyone was using chainmail. Everybody knew about chainmail. 1 second. Muhammad didn't know his history. Muhammad didn't know his history.
Well, your history is corrupt.
Do you want to talk about this passage?
I want to talk about you as a Christian, because you claim to be a very good Christian. Let's analyse Christianity today. Let's see what Christianity says today.
His response
you said, no.
is not to talk about the argument.
You get salvation through believing in Jesus Christ.
Is there anyone
1 second.
that wants to talk about the argument?
You claim salvation is through Jesus Christ crucifixion.
I can't hear you, sir. So the chapter and verse is this. Surah 34,
talking about Islam, but he's a
Ayah
Christian.
10
You can't talk about Christianity.
and Ayah
It
11.
don't make sense. It don't make sense, bro.
Go and tell the Dawah team the same thing when they talk about Christianity.
Go and talk to
It's amazing how they live by double standards.
That's our prophet.
Have you got it, sir? I take it you're reading it in Arabic, yeah?
Jesus over there, Nigeria.
The commentary. Okay. So, let me ask you this question, sir.
Jesus.
If I said, for instance, that Islam started in Pakistan, right? If I said that, how would you go about proving that I was wrong? That's not a proof, sir. That's just a statement. How would you, if I said, for the sake of argument, if I said, and I know it's wrong, but if I said Islam started in Pakistan, not Arabia, how would you go about proving that I'm an ignoramus that got it wrong? What would you do?
Facts and evidence.
Facts and evidence. What kind of facts and evidence? Historical facts and evidence, right? And geographical, yes, exactly. So you would look at sources, you would see how they correspond to geography, and you would look at artifacts, and you would triangulate those three things to conclude that if Bob said that Islam started in Pakistan, that Bob was an ignoramus because he said something that all the evidence contradicts. So, I already did, you just weren't listening. So, if Muhammad says that chainmail was around at the time of King David and all the evidence contradicts the Koran, why is it that you suddenly abandon the principle that you established to refute me if I say Islam starts in Pakistan, but when that same principle contradicts Muhammad, you won't go along with the evidence? Evidence, sir. I'm going to give you the evidence. all documents of antiquity show that our earliest possible date for the invention of chainmail is in the Persian period. The Persian period, the Persian Empire. Chainmail. It's a kind of armour, sir. It's linking small rings of steel together. And we see it in ancient statues. They depict it in art, they chisel it into statues. We have references to it in historical documents, like Herodotus in his histories. He talks about it. The Persians in their history talk about it. But at the time of King David, which is 1,000 years BC, history has no evidence of chainmail existing at that time. Zero, nada, nothing, not a drop of evidence. All the evidence shows it came later. Thus, when the Koran says that chainmail existed at the time of David, it is like me saying that Islam originated from Pakistan. There is no evidence for either statement. The Quran is wrong. Fact. It is in error. Fact. Now, if the evidence... One second, sir. I will let you respond. If the Quran is in error, then according to the Quran, which says if this were from any other than Allah, I would find many errors therein, because it's a challenge given to non-believers, not believers. I should not be able to find this error, and I do. Let this uncle go first, because he's... I accept it as a book of faith.
Would you respect that as a book of faith, that people who follow that faith and stood around you probably don't appreciate you waving it around and banging it against your chest?
But this is a translation, so it's not actually the Arabic Quran.
Okay, so
and
what you said is taken from that. So that's if that's not actually the Quran. And what you're saying is taken from that. How are we supposed to believe what you're saying?
Because it's a translation by a Muslim linguist.
Okay, so it is the Quran. It's the word of... We believe that it's a word of...
Well, you need to argue that with the Dawah team, because they're quite persistent in saying that it only exists in Arabic.
It's about respect. That's all I'm saying. I mean, what you're saying, freedom of speech, all that, I'll give you that. I'm not saying whether you're right, whether you're wrong or anything. All I'm saying is respect is not about factual or non-factual. It's just about... There's a lot of Muslims around here, and even as a non-Muslim, you know, if someone was stood here as a book of faith, I'm a Muslim. I wouldn't dare wave the Bible, whether it's translated in a completely different.
Actually, go speak to Lamin then. Go speak to some of your Muslim brothers who do exactly the same, and they put the Bible on the floor. Go and speak to them about respect.
Okay, regardless. So what you're saying is because they do it.
With respect, sir, I've heard your point. Uncle, what did you want to say? Yeah.
I'm just saying I wouldn't do that. I would have all the No, that's what respect is subjective, isn't it?
Well, I think that the comparison is a fair one, because what it illustrates is that... Uncle, allow me to... Hold on.
You know, if I'm especially I'm trying to say, and at least show some respect. I might then take what gentlemen here saying a bit more seriously. I take that.
Allow me to reply, Uncle. Let me just reply to this, Uncle, and then I'll talk to you. So, the problem, the issue is this, Uncle. If you say something that is factually false about a historical event, and all the evidence of history contradicts you, it is fair to say that statement is false. Well, allow me to reply, Uncle. If the Quran makes a statement about history that is factually false, it is fair to say the Quran got it wrong. But if Muslims are saying that the Quran can get nothing wrong, because if it got anything wrong, it wasn't from Allah, then by Muslims' own standards, every Muslim has a good reason now not to believe in the Quran. And that is a fair argument. It's fair because it employs a principle that works in all directions. It's fair because it does not misrepresent or mischaracterize the Muslim position. And it is fair because it's dealing with a very clear verse. I'll read it again. This is Allah speaking to David. Make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings of chain armour. That is a clear description of chainmail. Chainmail did not exist at the time of David. Muhammad got it wrong. Why? Because in the 7th century chainmail was commonly used everywhere. He saw it used everywhere, and he just assumed that people had been using it back at the time of David, and he got it wrong, because they weren't. The Persians invented chainmail. Arguably, the Celts invented chainmail. But either way, they all came after David. The Quran is just in error.
Bob, so you're a Christian, right?
Yes.
I got two questions really for you. One,
is it about this?
Yeah, it's about this.
Okay, fair enough.
One, if you're a Christian, why do you not come here and preach your religion to everyone and let them know about your religion?
Let me answer that question first then.
Go on.
So firstly, I do often, and I've just had it on camera, over an hour's worth of conversation about Christianity. So that's the first thing, you're corrected. Secondly, I find it strange that people come up to Christians and say, why are you attacking Islam? Shouldn't you preach Christianity? But he's never appeared on a single video going up to Shamsi, Hashim or Mansour and saying to them, why don't you preach Islam and not attack Christianity?
Who's attacking
There
Christianity?
is a double standard.
Who's attacking Christianity?
Mansour, Hashim and
Where
Shamsi.
are they? I'll go and speak to them now.
Yeah, go and speak to them.
I'll go and speak to them
I
now.
guarantee Hashim will be doing it right now. What was your second question?
You come and show me
What
who they
was your
are,
second question?
and I'll say the same thing to
What
them
was
too.
your second question?
Why do you feel the need to get at other people's religion?
Okay, so why do I tackle other people's religions? Simple. Because as Christians, we are instructed by the apostles to demolish every thought that sets itself up against... I'm answering your question, be patient. Sets itself up in opposition to the gospel. We are instructed as Christians to use polemics and apologetics as part of evangelism. Also, many Muslims in the first instance are not willing to entertain the claims of the Christian faith until you have demonstrated the falsity of Islam first. And finally, the Muslims in the corner attack the Christian faith. Put your hand up if you've heard a Muslim as spending their time attacking the Christian faith. It's not just me telling you, all of these people are telling you, and Banks is an atheist. So no one's lying.
I just ain't been walking around. Maybe I missed the conversation.
Maybe you're selective in what you hear. So the point of the matter is, if Muslims can attack Christianity, why can Christians not attack Islam?
I'm not saying that you can't.
Thank you.
I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm just saying, don't you think if you wanted to convert people to your religion, surely the best way about it would be to come down here and, spread some love rather than spreading hate, because that's
why is it hate?
Because when you insult people,
why am I insulting by criticism?
Well, if you say something about, listen, I'm no religion, so you can't offend me by anything you say.
Fine.
But if you start talking about someone's so-called prophet,
you mean like the Dawah team?
Then they're going to be offended by that.
You mean like the Dawah team?
That's hate. That's
so are the Dawah team guilty of hate speech?
I'll go over there now and I'll speak to them.
Go ahead.
If they're preaching, if they've got the Bible in their hand and they're saying this and this and this, then I'll go over there and I'll say to them, why are you not preaching your religion?
Yeah, go and
I've
speak
never
to
seen them. I only come down here and I've only seen extremist Christians. I haven't seen any extremist Muslims yet.
So I think you're selective in what you're seeing. Because all of these people, including an atheist, have all contradicted you. Yeah? Of all another atheist. Oh, sorry. All of these people. Let's just do it again, because maybe he's not convinced. If you have seen Muslims attacking the Christian faith, raise your hand. Raise your hand, Roll.
Just ask them about the Trinity.
Raise your hand. Right, brother, everyone is contradicting you. The narrative that you are presenting here...
I just said I'd never heard it for myself, so I'm not saying you're lying.
Right?
I never said you were lying.
No, hold on one second. I want to tackle...
I said I never heard it
I want to
myself.
tackle another fallacy that you've just laid at my door.
Go on.
We've blown apart his first fallacy.
What? You never blown nothing apart.
That Christians are attacking Islam, but Muslims are not attacking Christianity. Let's dismiss your second fallacy. Why is a criticism of a book... Do you know the legal definition of hate speech?
No, what's the legal definition?
You don't know the legal definition?
No, what's the legal definition?
The legal definition of hate speech is to incite violence against someone because of something like their race or their religion. How is pointing out a historical... One second, I haven't finished asking my question.
I know what you're going to say, so
no,
I'm
let
going to
me finish asking my question. How is pointing out a blatant historical error in the Koran fitting to that definition?
Because I never said you're actually doing hate speech.
Did he not just say
I didn't say that. No.
Did you hear him say, why are you doing hate speech?
I said they're gonna hate that you're talking about it. I never said
that's not what you said. You've changed what you've said.
They'll be able to watch it back. They'll be able to watch it back and see it.
Everyone put the time sequence in so
rewind
he can hear his own words.
Just rewind it back.
Yeah,
and listen to what I actually said.
Yeah,
and then you'll understand what I said. I never said.
We've got witnesses. Did you hear him say that I was preaching hate speech? Yes. So everyone's contradicting you again.
I said you were preaching hate speech.
That's what you said.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about people's profits, they're gonna hate that. They're not gonna like that. So that is hate.
That's not hate speech.
That's hate.
That's not hate speech.
It might not be hate speech as a legal term, but that's hate speech because at the end of the day,
So I'm not particularly fond of those sandals. They kind of offend me. Are you hate speeching against me with those sandals?
No, but that's a hate speech what you just said.
No, because
you're hating on my sandals.
Okay,
you're hating on my sandals.
Guys.
And now I'm upset that you're hating on my sandals. Why are you hating on my sandals
for? The risk that is happening in our society, and it is a real risk that you all have to take seriously, is that hate speech is being used to shut down freedom of speech. It is being used to close down freedom of speech. And it is being used to delegitimize speech. It is a rhetoric that is taking away your freedoms. And also, it is being confused with subjective feelings. He might feel offended that I as a Christian criticise Islam, but not offended that Muslims are doing the same thing, though he probably has heard them doing that.
No, you're lying now. Now
He
you're
probably
lying.
has.
Now you're lying.
I'm saying
now
you
you're lying.
probably have.
Now you're lying.
I'm saying you
because
probably
at the end of the day,
have.
you're just assuming.
I'm
just
saying you
assuming
probably
that I'm
have.
taking sides.
I
But
think
I don't
you are.
take no sides.
I think you are.
I think you're all wrong.
Now, you
So-
didn't actually address this question.
I want to do one thing for you.
Yeah.
You're Muslim.
No.
Are you not Muslim?
Guys. Okay, if you want to listen to these two talk, stay here. If you want to listen to me talk, I'm going to take a step over there.
Go on, Bob. See you later.
Follow me if you want to talk.
See you later, Bob. See you later, Bob. See you later, Bob.
Who here's a Muslim? You're here. You're a Muslim,
So,
become extremely kung fu-like with that
the guy, ladies and gentlemen, the Quran has historical errors within it. It says that there was a mosque in Jerusalem in the 7th century. That is a lie. It says that David had chainmail. That is a lie. These are errors in the Quran, a supposed book that is without error. I'll give you an okay, it's a fair question. Right. Maybe it is more accurate to say that it's an error. Do you believe the Koran has any errors in it? No. Right. Do you know, sir, when chainmail was invented? Do you know what chainmail is? Sorry? No. Chainmail is a form of armour. It's a form of armour created by linking rings of steel together. Okay? We know when it was invented. We know where it was invented. The earliest records of it go back to the Persians. They came hundreds of years after David. You know who David is in the Quran? Who is David? Thank you. Okay. When did David live? A long, long time. His exact dates are 1,000 years before Christ. The Persians came hundreds of years after David was born and died. The Quran says this: we bestowed grace aforetime on David. From ourselves, O ye mountains, sing back the praises of Allah with him, and ye birds also, and we made him the iron sovereign, commanding, listen to the next bit, make thou coats of mail, balancing well, rings of chain armour. Would you agree that is a description of chain mail?
Did you know that
you would agree? So the Quran has said that something exists historically before all the evidence shows its existence. Thus, the Quran is in error. Can the Quran be in error? So if all the evidence contradicts the Quran,
I agree with you totally.
okay, so the Muslim, and he's totally entitled to this position, says, I will believe by faith that the Quran is correct, even if it contradicts the evidence. Now let me show you how we won't work to that principle. If I said to you, sir, that Islam started in Pakistan and not Arabia, how would you prove me wrong? He would show me what? There you go. He would appeal to historical evidence. So, when I make a false claim about Islam, he would rightfully appeal to historical evidence to show that I was wrong. And he's correct to do so. But if I show a historical error in the Quran, rather than believe the historical evidence that contradicts the Quran, he says, I will believe the Quran against the evidence. That, sir, is cognitive disconnect. You apply one principle to deal with one thing and a different principle to deal with a different thing when their category is the same. They're both historical statements. Now, why is this important? It's important because Muslims make the claim that this Quran is without error. The Quran itself says, if this was from any other than Allah, disbelievers like me would find errors in the Quran. Lo and behold, I do. Lo and behold, by the standard of the Quran is false. Therefore, by the Quran's own standard, it is not true. And if something is not true, you don't need to believe in it. Why am I, as a Christian, criticizing the Quran? It is because many Muslims here in the park spend their entire day criticizing the Bible. And I think it's fair, if Muslims will criticize the Bible, I can criticize the Quran. But here's the difference. Here's the difference. We Christians do not make the same claims about our Bible that Muslims make about their Koran. Christians believe that our book appeared in history. Muslims believe the Koran is eternal. Christians believe our books were created. Muslims believe that the book was uncreated. Christians believe that our book was given to men. God inspired them. He elevated their mind, their reasoning, and their perception to know what was important to God in history and what God was doing. But they were writing man's words in the Bible, inspired by the Holy Spirit. Men's words. Men's words are fallible. Christians readily admit to and do not deny that there are difficult passages in the New Testament. All the Old Testament, shortly, sir, yes. Yes, certainly, shortly. However, we have a restricted understanding of what the Bible is in terms of its infallibility. Questions of doctrine and workings of righteousness, moral and doctrine teaching. By contrast, Muslims claim for this book that it does not make any errors at all. None, zero, nada, zip, not in history, not in science, not in doctrine. So when the Quran is contradicted by all the historical evidence, you have a choice. You can either do as this gentleman did and say, I am a Muslim, I'll believe anyway what the Quran says despite the evidence, or you can follow where the evidence leads you, and the evidence leads you out of Islam and away from this Quran. Your reply, sir.
You know what you can do. Firstly, I'm not harming anyone.
No, it isn't.
If I'm having sex with somebody and another person doesn't know, that's not harming them.
Factually wrong.
I've done something so really bad that, you know, it's not like stealing. If I stole somebody's stuff, that's a big translation. If I went and had sex with another girl behind my girlfriend's back and she didn't ever find out, what she never knew would never hurt her.
Isa is an unknown word. That is not the name of Jesus. Jesus' name was Yeshua.
So at the end of the day, all I'm
The Arab Christians translate the name of Jesus in their earliest Bibles to Yesu, not Isa. Arabic. They translate it. That's a fact. It's just a fact.
There is no difference. Inside the Bible, I want to ask you a question. Why is there one version from Catholics and a different version for other people? There are so many different versions of Bibles out there. There are groups of people who sit and rewrite the Bible and edit the Bible. That has never happened from the day the Bible.
Can I reply? Okay, let me reply. Let me reply. So the question is, why do Catholics and Protestants have different Bibles? The answer is a simple one, really simple. They don't agree about which book should be in the Bible. Protestants and Catholics have a disagreement about which book should be in the Bible. Let me reply. In exactly the same way that Muslims disagree about which hadiths to believe. The Sunni and the Shia use different hadiths.
No, Quran one.
No.
One Quran.
No. No. 1 second, I'm still replying to him. Don't be rude. Raoul, stop feeding the... Raoul, bro, discipline. So, the brother made another point. He said every Quran in the world was the same, and he repeated the same thing. That is factually not true. It's factually not true. If you compare the Hafs Quran, if you compare the Hafs Quran to the Wash Quran, they're different. They're different in their diacritical marks, and their diacritical marks affect the consonants, because at least 22 of 28 Arabic letters cannot be distinguished except by the diacritical marks. But, one second, I have not finished. Last point. Last point. Last point. Last point. Last point. Last point. So, it gets worse. Dr. Daniel Brubaker has recently, this very week, released a doctorate study. Brother, have the courtesy to listen to an answer. Just bad manners. Just bad manners. Just bad manners. So, Dr. Daniel Brubaker has recently released a study of the oldest manuscripts of the Quran. These are the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Sinai, the Husseini manuscript in Egypt, the Petropolitan manuscript in Paris, and the Millet manuscript in the British Library. These are recognised as the oldest copies of the Quran, and he has noted that they have textual variants to the 1924 edition of the Quran. The brother is simply wrong in every way in saying that every Quran is the same. It's just not true.
Let me first let me go across about the differences. There's Hafs, there's different words, there's different types of dialects. When you go to the north of England, somebody might say to you glass. When you come to the south of England, somebody might say to you glass. Does that make it different? No, it's just a matter of dialect, it's just a matter of accent. If you're coming from north, it's different to south. So when you're actually having people reading the Quran, it's in different variants due to the accents that they have come with. But the meaning does not change. The words are the same.
Can I reply? Can I reply? Let me reply to this brother. Is it my turn to reply? I don't want to interrupt you. Okay. So his argument was that these textual variants... Allow me to... Sir, stop interrupting. Sir,
I did not say that.
Yeah, you interrupted.
I am not interrupting because I said it's to do with linguistics.
If you would actually let me finish, allow me to reply without interruption. So, if you can constrain yourselves and listen to the full sentence, you will realise that you were not mischaracterised. But you did not restrict yourself, and so you did not hear what I had to say. So now discipline your heart. Now, his argument is that these textual variants are nothing but dialect accent, like glass and gloss. Now, firstly, that is not what a dialectical difference is. A dialectical difference is something akin to saying tunnel and gennel. That's a dialectical difference. He's talking about accents, not dialectical differences.
Is the meaning the same?
Don't interrupt.
Is the meaning the same?
Don't interrupt. However, the kind of textual variance we are talking about is the difference between saying tree and trees. Now tell me, sir, is a plural the same as a singular? No. So if we have in these textual variants the same word, but one is singular and another plural, are they the same? No.
But
thank you.
Linguistically, let
Didn't see that one coming, did you?
Let me tell you guys linguistically. Yes, in the Quran, our Lord, Rabbana, our Lord says, we are this, we are that. It's linguistically respectful. When you speak to someone, when I speak to an elder, I will address him in my language in plurality. Why will I address him in plurality? Because it's respectful. It's respectful. I will not call an elder. I will not call an elder from anything other than respect. Now in the languages there are different ways of respecting people. In the language of Arabiya, in the language of Fusha, the way to respect somebody is to call them into the plurality. Now the other thing I want to say is, for clearly we have been told, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوا هَذَا صِرَاطُ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. And Isa alayhi salam, Jesus as you call him, said, peace upon him, said, and indeed Allah is my Lord and your Lord, so worship him. And inside the Bible, the original Bible, the untouched Bible,
I want to see on camera.
That actually go on. I clearly tell you that when Jesus said, he did not say, worship me, I am the Lord. He said, I will worship the Lord. I worship the Lord.
Can I
he
reply?
went down onto his knees and face.
Can I reply?
As we do 5 times a day.
Can I reply? Okay, so notice he wants to get off the topic of the textual variants. He wants to change the topic now about, oh, we Muslims are more like Jesus than you are. Despite the fact that Jesus prayed towards Jerusalem and kept the Sabbath and the Muslims don't. Anyway, that aside, let's get back to the topic. He has admitted that a plural is not the same as a singular. And there are examples between the Hafs and the Wash Quran where the same word appears in the Hafs as a singular and then appears in the Wash as a plural. Thus, they are not the same. Thus, my original statement is true, and his original statement that they are all the same and there is only one Quran is false. But here's another example for you. Is the word owner the same as the word king? No. Well, there's a passage in the Quran where the Hafs says king and the what? Yes, he knows it. He knows it. So, is every owner a king and is every king an owner? Yes, they are.
In your linguistically, no. What you got to realize when he's speaking about God, he is the King of Kings. If you speak about the owner, he is the owner of all owners.
But they're not the
He's
same
above
thing.
Everything.
But they're not the same thing.
When you are translating it into English, into any other language, it loses the essence.
No, we're not talking about translation. We're talking about the Arabic. One Arabic says owner and another Arabic says king. That is a textual variant. That is a textual variant. They are not the same thing.
That is the accent.
What is the academic? No, it is not. Wait. Oh, no, don't let him get away, brother. He's just said, listen to this. Listen to this. He has just said that the word owner and the word king is an accent. They're not accent differences, that's a different word. One is owner and one is king. They are not the same word. And every academic will tell you that that is a textual variant. That is the very definition of a textual variant. Do you know what a textual variant is? What is a textual variant?
When they differ.
What differs? What differs? Let me give a more accurate definition of a textual variant. A textual variant is when you have multiple manuscripts containing the same text, in this example the Quran, and those manuscripts have different words or letters. That is the academic definition of a textual variant. If you have two texts, two manuscripts that are taught, that have different words, you cannot say they are the same. That is a lie. And you certainly can't say that the word owner and the word king are the same word. And you're aware of them.
For him, he is owner of the two worlds. What are the two worlds? Rabbul Alameen. He is owner of this world and the world in the hereafter, where there will be hell and there will be heaven, where we will be questioned. He is also the king of these two worlds. So in contextual-wise, if you say, okay, there's variance, the meaning is not different.
So are
if
we
you want
agree?
to,
Okay, go on.
I'll agree to you. You saying
I think the way you have nursed that B, by the way, is a wonderful example of gentleness. I just want to applaud you. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to applaud. It's a wonderful example of gentleness.
But what we got into is we have the Quran. We have what it says inside of it. Yes, there are words, there are differences, and yes, I agree to what you're saying. Owner and king is totally different.
Thank you.
I totally agree to that. But what we are trying to get to is not just the words, but to reflect upon what it's talking about. If he is the owner, Maliki Yawmiddin, he is the owner of the religion, he is the king of the religion. At the same time, for Allah, it does not matter because he is for everything. God is in charge of everything. He created everything. Whether he is owner of all the creations or whether he's owner or king of all the creations.
May I reply? So, do you remember at the very beginning of our discussion on the text of the Quran that you said that there is one Quran and they are all the same?
Yes.
Now that we've talked about it some more, are you still saying that all the Qurans are the same?
Yes.
Right. There you go. Cognitive dissonance.
It's not cognitive dissonance.
You have accepted.
Because you in the Quran.
You have accepted a textual variant exists, but then you're saying it's the same.
It is written the same.
It's
But it's the person with his different accent that says it differently. It is written the same.
So it's not the same word.
So no.
Is Maliki the same as Malik?
Maliki, but the thing is, you've got to go back to the history of how the people spoke at that time.
It's a straight question. Is Maliki the same as Malik?
Maliki? Maliki is the same as Malik.
I'm not Arab, it's not my first language, so obviously you'll have to make allowances for the mispronunciation.
Malik
Are they the
and
same word?
Ma.
Are they the same word?
Two different words?
Two different words.
As you say from written, but in written it's not.
Right. What you
It's
now...
the accent.
No. That's not an accent.
Why can't we... It is the accent.
An accent?
Why can't we talk about northerners and southerners? Why do southerners go and say glass, pass?
Right.
Why do northerners go and say the same
Right,
word, pass?
Allow me to address that point. Because you are profoundly confusing the question of accents with textual variants. Let me explain why. You are using the... Well, let me explain why. You are using the example of glass and gloss to try and explain the way that one version of the Quran says king and another version of the Quran says owner. That is not an equivalent comparison. An equivalent comparison, would be an example I'll use from the Bible, where we have textual variants and we readily talk about them, where one says, referring to Jesus, he, and another one says, Jesus. Those are two different words. They are a textual variant. Right? Now, pronoun and a name are not the same thing, even if they're referring to the same person. That is the kind of example that we've got when we talk about king and owner. And now we Christians are honest, because our religion is not built on the book emerges from our religion, that we don't have a problem with these textual variants. It doesn't matter a jot to me as a Christian. 1 second, bro. It doesn't matter a jot to me as a Christian whether the Bible says he or Jesus. They're talking about that. They're talking about it. And we Christians have never, ever, ever claimed that the Bible has been perfectly preserved and there is only one Quran in existence. But you have, and the evidence contradicts you, because we can see clearly there are multiple Qurans, and not just in terms of the hafs and the wash. But when you compare the ancient Qurans to the 1924 edition, there are corrections to the ancient
I
text.
will agree with you. There are corrections. There are corrections in the Quran. But what I am trying to tell you, when the Arabs of the old, they actually wrote the Quran. They wrote the Quran. If you look at the letters, they have dots.
Yes.
They have that. In the olden times, there were no dots.
Correct.
Like for example, the letter Sh. It's a circle with 3 dots right now. Yeah. And the letter S is just the same as the Sh, but without the 3 dots. In the olden times, there were no dots. This is an innovation of the newer times for people to distinguish between the letters.
Thank you.
What time coming?
Yes, there are.
What time?
Actual words. Actual Allah. In the,
words
in the Husseini manuscript, honestly, bro, she's correct. She's correct. So, well done, sister. Absolutely
I agree.
right.
I agree with you. Yes, you say a Husseini manuscript. You say they're Shia.
Yeah.
Shia never existed in the time of
They
the Prophet.
added the name Allah
Shia never
12
existed.
times to the Husseini manuscript.
Ilahim in Hebrew.
Can I just point out
in Hebrew,
something?
you say Ilahim.
Brother, can I just point out something? The manuscripts that were investigated by Dr. Daniel Brubaker are your earliest manuscripts. You don't have earlier ones to look at, okay? They are your earliest. And they were written before the implementation of the diacritical marks. So they were written before vowelization of the text. Now, they demonstrate the fact that those texts had erasures. Do you know what an erasure is in textual criticism? An erasure is when a word is there and then someone comes along and scrapes it away. Okay? So there's examples where someone has come and written a word and then someone later has come and removed the word. There's example of tapeovers. Do you know what a tapeover is? No. Well, yes, sometimes. So a tapeover is when you have a series of words that you want to get out. You want to splot it out. It's the ancient equivalent of Tipex. You put manuscript over the top of it, so it's just blank, and it blots it out. Now sometimes those erasures are written over, which means that at some point in Islamic history, somebody thought that the Quran should include some words that then other Muslims thought, no, those words shouldn't be there. And they corrected the text.
Can I tell you why I think it's seduction?
Go on.
Because from the starting, even if there's written and everything like that, people at the starting were not writing, they would pass it on by the word of
mouth.
Yes. Totally agree?
I'll come to that.
Okay. The Chinese whisper and all that comes along. But why is it that the Quran that is found in Iceland, forget the written part, but what he says is the same as the one found?
This is a claim that can never be proved. Let me explain. Bro, this is a myth.
Okay. There are so many people who have
They can never prove this claim. This claim can. I'm going to come. Bro, you're stealing my thunder. Stop stealing my thunder. You're stealing my thunder. Bro, I understand the claim. It's a recitation and it's remembered. Right? But you've got to understand, objectively, this claim can never be tested. Right? The only way that you could prove that every recitation is the same is if you stuck every reciter in a room or recorded every reciter and then did a scientific analysis to see that all the recitations were the same.
I have been to South Africa, I've recited it's the same as if...
Doesn't make any difference. It is not proof.
I totally agree from the scientific point of view.
It is not proof. It is a claim, but it cannot be verified.
I totally agree with you on that point, that scientific proof it cannot be proved.
Right, let me ask you this question. Because Adnan's bursting to break into this conversation. So let me ask you this question. Yeah? In the earliest stage of Islam, why did the Quran become codified? What prompted the codification of the Quran into a manuscript text?
So for people who were able to write at that time, for people to send it?
No, that's not true. According to your own hadiths, the reason why Uthman was prompted by his generals, to codify the text of the Quran was because Muslims were fighting one another about its recitation. In other words, the idea of simply reciting the Quran failed. The first Muslims couldn't agree, and that prompted the earliest Muslims to have it codified into a text. Now, 1 second. I'm taking it you're a Muslim. You tried to learn the recitation of the Quran, of course. When you, as a student, tried to learn the recitation of the Quran, do you just listen and repeat, or do you listen, read and repeat?
I listen, I read, and repeat.
Exactly. And do you think that human beings in the past were any different?
No, but I've also learned stuff by just listening and repeating.
Yeah, but in terms of the Quranic recitation, let's be clear. It is impossible for a human being simply to learn through recitation. And it is demonstrated by the fact that that very effort that the Muslims genuinely tried to do in the first century failed. And that's why you had to have a text to help people recite the Quran. But here's the problem. I don't know if you know the hadiths. One of the hadiths state that Uthman said to Zayd bin Thabit, who was the secretary of Muhammad, that if you are in dispute about how something should be written, write it in the dialect of the Quraysh. Yeah? Now, how scripturally do you demonstrate dialects in Arabic script?
Different ways. I understand where you're coming from.
No. I want you to answer this question. Because if you don't, I'll answer it for you. Scripturally, how do you demonstrate different dialects in the script of Arabic?
By the way it's written.
Yes, but what specifically? What helps you to pinpoint this dialect and not dialect? The dots, right. At the time of Uthman, Kufic Arabic did not have dots. So why does the hadith talk about something that didn't exist at the time of Muhammad? I'll tell you why. It's because the hadith wasn't created at the time of Muhammad. It was created after the time of Muhammad, and it was created by Muslims who were aware of diacritical marks because they had been put into the text. And those Muslims did not know that at the time of Muhammad there were no diacritical marks. And so they put into the words of Uthman and his generals words that they never uttered. And these hadiths are called Tahi. Your religion is based upon a myth. Your book is full of errors. Your Quran has been changed. It is time to find a better God, sir.
That God is?
The Christian faith. Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob.
The God of Abraham, the God of Jacob, the God of Moses.
Yes, that God.
The God of David.
That God. The God of John the Baptist. The God of Jesus Christ. The God of all the prophets. The God of God's Messiah.
Is also the God of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Well, all the evidence would seem to suggest otherwise, and we've just talked about that at great length. Anyway, so you're a very pleasant man. You have a lovely day. I really encourage you to think about what you've heard today. Okay? And then if you want to come back and next time we talk, if you want to spend an hour talking about Christianity, I'll gladly do that with you.
I just want to finally just go away by saying, as it said in the Quran, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ رَبُّكُمْ رَبِّي فَعَبُدُوا هَذَا صِرَاطُ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ.
Right.
And Isa alayhi salam never ever called himself God, never once.
I can show you that in a minute.
Well, plenty of it. Are you referring to your books?
It all converts to accept this.
I am going to go.
But that's what I'm going to say.
I'll just reply to that point, and then I'm going to go. Okay? In the Quran, Allah has 99 names, doesn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Exactly.
99 names.
Yeah.
Right. Right? Yeah. And these are his names, aren't they? Yeah. And one of those 99 names is that Allah is the first and the last, isn't it? So that's two names of Allah. I'm going to show you where Jesus calls himself the first and the last. Because you just said a lie.
Yeah.
Not because you're lying, but because you have been lied to.
Show it to me in English.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Translation, there's an illness of translation. Not one language.
No, it's not a translation.
Bro, before you make up excuses, at least listen to the evidence.
I'm going to listen, and I'm going to, before you read this,
bro,
I know, can I just
no, 1 second. You just said that Jesus never called himself God. That's what you said. I am going to show you, not only does he call himself God, but he calls himself your God. by using the names your God uses. And the real question is not whether Jesus calls himself God. The real question is, why does, he's not even listening, why does Allah steal the divine names of Jesus? Listen to this. This is Jesus speaking. I, Jesus, have sent my angel. He's the one speaking. This is what he says before that. Behold, I am coming quickly. My reward is with me to render every man according to what he has done. I am the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last. Yes. That is Al-Awwal and Al-Akhir. Those are the names of Allah that appear in the Quran. So now let me ask you one quick question. Why does Muhammad take the divine names of Jesus and attribute them to Allah?
Absolutely. Now let me answer that with your question. Why did Jesus need to be born?
So,
why did he have to go through the dirt and the dust and
That's changing the subject.
Changing the subject.
Changing
the subject.
Always they return in the question by the question.
Okay, bro, I said I would show you where Jesus called himself God. I've done that. It is up to you now whether you accept what you saw in the Bible or you accept the lies that Zakir Naik, Ahmadidat, Hashim, and all these other people are saying to you in the masjid.
I will never, ever in my life testify to
May I ask you what Shahada means in Arabic? By Arabic, can you translate?
Okay, let's do a wrap up for those that want to hear the wrap up.
What Shahada means?
Shahada?
Yeah.
To be witness.
To be witness. How you witness?
I'm letting Leon come because in case there's issues with the microphone. Okay. You what? Hey, brother. One day you're going to say that and it'll be true. So, what we've seen is this. Muslims make claims about their Quran that open the Quran to investigation and falsification. If you say that your text is not in error in any way, and then people find errors in your text, then that is good grounds to dismiss your texts. A claim that we do not make in a similar fashion to our own. The Quran gets its history wrong. It says that a mosque exists where a mosque doesn't exist. It says that a mosque was built at a time when no mosque was built, according to the hadith. It says that chainmail was created by a man who could not possibly invented chainmail. Muslims claim that their Quran has never been changed. All the evidence contradicts that. Comparisons between the halves and the wash, owner and king. Comparisons of the ancient manuscripts, the Samarkand, the Topkapi, the Petropolitan, the Mial, to the 1924 version. Demonstrate changes to the text. At every point where Muslims make a claim about their Quran, that claim collapses in the face of evidence. The claim, the central claim of Christianity is that Christ rose from the dead. And that claim has been challenged for over a millennia, and the evidence continues to mount up on our side, not against us. I invite you, if you're a Muslim, not to make a jump of faith, but to follow the evidence. The evidence contradicts your religion. Go with the evidence, leave Islam. Look again at the Christian faith, look again at the Christian claims and weigh them up. Not by what Muslims say about our claims in the masjid, not by what Zakir Naik says or Ahmadidat, but by speaking to knowledgeable Christians and learning our faith from us. I greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Have a lovely day. Christus anestasin. Are you coming for a coffee?
I'm fit than I thought.
What about gay people? You know what he said? Love one another. Love one another. That is something. Love one another. Love one another. Gay love. Homosexual love. No. There's a lot. No homosexual. No homosexual. They're lovers. They love each other. They love each other. They love each other. Yeah, they love. I'm Marco. I'm Marco Oluba. I'm Marco Oluba. I'm Marco. I don't want to remember you. I want to forget you today.
But in terms of realistic what we do know is that we know St. Paul 600 years ago.
Do you want to like put your pants on over here? Yeah. In front of the video.
Hear some crazy.
Like mathematical John or okay, what was in the time of Muhammad? That was a good question. Now, as you know, that's about well, these earlier scriptures, which are not complete, but they're intact, and they're a lot earlier. Like this is a small part of this.